welcome everyone to another episode of Law and Order. Now, I see the comments. Why are we late? Listen, Law and Order is never early, nor are we late. We arrive precisely when we intend to. It's great to be here with my co-host, Ryan Mullally, today. Got a lot of stories to talk about. I've had a long weekend. I know Ryan, as someone who actually has a job, always very busy, but it's a pleasure to sit here and talk with you all about sort of the legal stories that we see in our current political structure. Ryan, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, Rob. Great to be here as always. And I know we say this every week. We say, surely this is the week where we're going to have nothing to talk about. The legal news is going to calm down. But nope. Turns out this week is banger after banger after banger as well. But sometimes we're here with Debbie Downer news. Today, there's some very positive news coming out of the Fifth and Ninth Circuit for Trump, where he got some big wins, which I think are great things to talk about, particularly because I think they're going to make the deportation efforts much more efficient going forward. But we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's so much like of our disclosure gets wrapped up in sort of the things that are easy to see on the camera. So like if there's a violent altercation with ICE or things that you see with like Epstein files as far as the news that's salacious and everything. But oftentimes the real business, I think, has to do with these court cases and what that allows the executive branch to do. So I agree. I think this is big news coming out that's largely beneficial to Trump, and we'll see what that does to his efforts going forward. So we're going to talk about that. We are going to talk about some of the Thomas Massie, Ro Khanna, Epstein stuff. We get a special treat with a frequent frenemy of my show. Talk about some of his comments that we want to look at. Remember, if you guys have any comments on the specific topics that we're discussing, or if you have any comments whatsoever about other legal topics you'd like us to cover, you can send super chats either to Ryan's channel or mine, and we will make sure we'll get to those. Even if we don't get to it during the show, we'll each be reading them after the show as well. So I see no reason not to jump in to the two court cases you're talking about. So lead us through the first one you want to talk about. Give us a little idea of like what specifically this case was about, and then, what the ruling was that came down that was favorable for Trump.
So this is the one that I think is probably the biggest news that nobody's talking about. But you should. And I'm not going to do, Law and Order is kind of more of a legal news summary show. I'm not going to do a line-by-line breakdown here. If you want to see a line-by-line breakdown of this, me and potentially criminal Sean did it. It's on my channel. It's on his. Go check that out. But this case, Menendez... I'm not going to even try. So I'm sorry. I can't roll the R's. But this case coming out of the Fifth Circuit, this is enormous for the Trump administration because there's a little known legal rule that has been thrown in Trump's face over and over and over again. And when, for example, people say ICE has lost 300, 4,000, whatever the number of cases mean, this is a huge chunk of this. Hundreds and thousands of these cases have come down to this one issue, which is prior to this administration, the last 30 years, executive branches have interpreted immigration law as follows. And I think it's a crazy interpretation, but this is what they've been saying. If we detain a potential illegal at the border, they don't have to get bail. We can hold them no bail. But if they bypass the border and they evaded detection, and then we find them later inside the country, they get bail. That's obviously a crazy rule because it treats people who evaded the border better than people who checked in at the border. So this is obviously nonsense, right? But it's been happening for 30 years, and the Trump administration changed it. They started saying no bail, and the law allows this. But they've lost something like 350 cases where judges say, no, you have to give him bail anyway. You have to give him bail. But in this case, coming out of the Fifth Circuit, Judge Edith Jones, and remember her name if you're a fan of good law. She's a wonderful woman. I'm in the Federalist Society. She's in the Federalist Society. I've seen her speak. I've had dinner with her. I've seen her remarks. She's a fabulous human being and just a based American. Judge Jones wrote this opinion that changed the game. Now, if you are detained as an illegal and you cannot prove that you should be released, you can be held without bail. And we can take this down now, Rob, but I don't want to do the line by line.
Sure.
But here's why this is such a big deal, just to give like the TLDR. It takes years to do a full deportation proceeding. If you're on bail, you get to be in the country. You get to live, you get to make money, you send it home to your family, right? If you're held on bail, you're held in detention, what happens? Well, it's going to take years. It's going to take 1.5 years to get you deported, right? Suddenly, that check the Trump administration's offer, where they say if you self-deport, we'll give you $2,600 and a plane ticket, that looks really appealing. So this rule, it's only in the Fifth Circuit, but this rule would totally change the immigration enforcement apparatus. We would have people mass self-deporting if this rule holds. So I think this is an enormous win for the Trump administration.
You know, it's funny. I was reading, there's this sort of viral post that went through on X, and it was like, every week now, you'll see news coming out of this administration that you're like, wait, what? They were allowed to do that like previously? Like just insane stuff. And this is one of those, right? So when I was reading, I haven't gone through this, but when I was reading sort of the highlights of this, my first reaction was, wait, what? That actually happened? They allowed people? There was a difference if you came through sort of a port of entry and did things more or less the right way that you were supposed to be doing, versus if you just escaped and intentionally did it the wrong way, you were treated more beneficially. But that was the case. And, you know, I think that this is a lot of the conversation I think you get when it was people not showing up for their hearings, right? Because presumably they'd been out on bail, and then it's like, hey, and by the way, we expect you to come back to these hearings. Well, the worst of the worst, they're just gonna, right? Like, as soon as they're like, sure, I got bail, what's their incentive to show up at that point, particularly if they know they don't have a case? If you're someone that's got, like, you know, a detainer on you for being connected to a cartel, something, you're not going to come back, right?
I mean, it's madness, Rob. It's total madness. The in legal terms, right? Like when judges assess whether to give someone bail and whether you can get it on cash bond, one of the things they look at is, are you a flight risk? That's one of the core things. Well, you just evaded the authorities to enter the country illegally. So there's pretty good evidence you're a flight risk. You don't seem like the type who's trying to do things by the numbers, right? So giving preferential bail to people who've evaded the authorities and denying that treatment for people at the border who are doing it more properly is totally insane. And the law does not require this. It really doesn't. Now, mysteriously, apparently Trump lost this argument like 350 times in district courts that you could imagine, Boasberg, the same courts over and over and over again. But the argument, and this is going to make you laugh when I try to, because it's only a lawyer could come up with an argument this dumb. The law basically is very clear that if you are seeking entrance to the United States, right, then this applies to you. No bail if we are detained, right? Their argument was, oh, they're not seeking entrance. They're already here, and they have no they have no intention of doing this legally. They're just here illegally, and they're never going to seek entrance. So they get the better treatment because they're not even trying to use the system. That's the honest to God argument that won 350 times, which is, I mean, you don't need to be a lawyer to realize that that's insane.
Well, I think you already gave what the best news for this would be, which is what the administration, I think, ultimately wants to do. By the way, I think there are better ways they can go about it, or other things we'll say that they could do, such as going after employers. But ultimately, the best case scenario at this point is self-deportations. You would like the legal system to be involved as little as possible. And the idea of like, well, here's an offer, we'll send you this check for $2,600 if you deport. I think this is the exact type of thing that is likely to lead to that, not just for the people that they keep on bail, but then for the people that were like already out on bail, where it's like, listen, at this point, if you get caught up, you think, oh, that's all right, they'll take me back into holding and then I'll get bail and I'll go out until they schedule a hearing. I'll be out for years. I do think that this will start to send a signal, and that's exactly what we need. The question is, what are the chances that this gets applied to other circuits or other districts around the country?
That's exactly the right question, Rob, because this rule would be an absolute game changer. It would be an absolute game changer. Who in their right mind would stay in detention for a year to fight their case rather than self-deport? No one. That's a crazy thing to do, right? And so ultimately, this would streamline the process tremendously. Now, it's only in the Fifth. So, you're talking Texas, you're talking Louisiana, you're not talking the whole country. The question is, will the Supreme Court take this issue up, right? And this is being litigated all over the country, but we don't yet have a circuit split. So normally the Supreme Court takes a case when the one circuit does one thing, another does another. That's not a hard and fast rule, but the Trump administration just won. So they don't need to appeal. So the question is, and this is always an interesting question for litigation strategy, will the plaintiffs go to the Supreme Court and ask for relief? Because if they do, I think they'll lose. I think the Supreme Court's going to side with the Fifth Circuit, but maybe they want to roll those dice. If they do, I think an appeal would be tremendously good news for the Trump administration. But if they don't, then we'll have to see it come up in another circuit first.
And just to be clear, if they appeal to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court rules the same as the Fifth Circuit, that would then apply to all circuits, not just to the Fifth, correct?
Yeah, that would become the law of the land. And I mean, this is, again, if you want to see like the legal breakdown and the nitty gritty, go check out my channel, check out Sean's channel. We have videos up on it where he and I broke the whole thing down. But the legal argument is really strong for the Trump administration. Like basically the petitioners here were hanging their hat on the idea that, I mean, it's farcical stuff. For example, they would say things like we weren't even applying to be in the country, so this shouldn't apply to us. And they say, okay, if we were applying, in one sentence it uses applying for admission, and in another sentence it says seeking admission. But surely if we were applying, even if we're applying for admission, we weren't seeking admission, right? And Judge Jones had this really funny line, which she goes, tell me, especially, she said in the opinion, she said, find me a situation where you are applying for admission to college and you are not seeking admission.
Right.
Like, come on. Like, this is like a level of legalese that's just nonsense. Like,
yeah.
At a certain point, you have to use some common sense. Like, there's no way that Congress wanted people who evaded authorities to get preferential treatment. Why would anybody want that? It's nonsensical.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, but like these two plaintiffs, what type of facility are they held in now that they won't be eligible for bail? Is it just like a normal jail system, or is there like specific like immigration detention centers that they're held in?
Well, I don't know where these ones are held. I did see today, though, that DHS, with all the funding they got in the One Big Beautiful Bill, have started buying up big warehouses. I think they did like a $70 million real estate deal recently, and they're building more detention facilities to go along with the ones in Florida. So I think what it seems like they're, at least what they're signaling on the administration level, is that they would want to have these detention facilities on the ready. Now, hopefully, no one's held there for a long time. Because as you said, the goal would be you put them in detention, a month later they go, holy shit, this isn't worth it, I'll take the 2,600, right? And look, for those of you thinking, why are we paying these people? You spend 10, 100 times the 2,600 to hold them in detention for 1 month, right? Like, it's wildly expensive to hold them in detention. It's wildly expensive to do these court proceedings. The self-deportation is the definition of a win-win.
Yes, absolutely. And look, like one of the problems that going back with the immigration debate in a long time, even if you go back to sort of the Reagan amnesty, it sort of goes like this. You have the immigration hawks that are like, look, we need to secure the border, right? And then, and this is if we're taking them at face value, right? And then the other side, like sort of the Democrat side's like, yes, but what about the people that are already here? So the traditional argument went something like this. Like dreamers. Well, we'll consider having a deal with the dreamers, but we have to secure the border. And then it's like, well, which one do we do first? And one of the lessons, in my opinion, from the Reagan amnesty debacle is you have to secure it and have something to make sure that you don't see any more mass illegal waves of immigration, because otherwise the incentive is there. And so one pushback that I've seen is like, yes, but if we pay people to leave, doesn't that provide an incentive for people to just come right back in and be like, hey, we'll get back in and then we'll get paid to leave again? But I think the counter to that is No, because at least right now, under the Trump administration, they've done such a good job of securing the border. So, step one, secure the border, and then sort of but we're paying them to leave. Isn't that an incentive? No. I think that it is the ideal situation at this point to have it done, not only to ensure that there's no like violence or anyone being, treated harmfully, but also I think it's cheapest and it's
Mhm.
just preferable in all senses. So, I don't
It-
see it as an incentive at this point if the Trump administration continues to secure the border.
Not if they're doing it right, and I have no reason to think they're not. So I'm going to assume the Trump administration is crossing their T's and dotting their I's, because one of the things about immigration law is if you the first time you cross the border illegally, people always say it's not a crime to be here illegally. It's a misdemeanor, right? And we've talked about this. The reason
Yep.
it's not a felony is because then for a felony you need a trial, right? Which is a whole other thing. But if you've already crossed the border once and it's been documented and you got caught and then you do it again, now you're looking at criminal charges, right? So in terms of the incentives, we could, if we wanted to, if someone self-deported and then they came back, that if the Trump administration is documenting it correctly, you could lock them up and throw away the key if you wanted to at that point, right? Now, that's still more expensive than self-deportation, so query what the right thing to do is. But ultimately, it comes down to what you said. If the border isn't secure, nothing else actually matters, right? Like the way I always phrase it when I talk to normies about it is it's like talking about immigration policy with an unsecured border is like me talking about water conservation when the hose spigot to my house is broken and water's just pouring out into the street, right? Like, who gives a shit what my water conservation policy is if my house is a goddamn fire hydrant? You have to actually have a border, and then you can talk about sensible policy. But if it's not secure, then all the policy in the world won't matter.
Yeah, I totally agree. This judge specifically that you're talking about, or Edith Jones.
Edith Jones.
Edith Jones. What is there going to be like, attacks on the left that she's not professional or that she's in the bag for Trump? Like, who appointed her? How long?
Good God. Good luck doing that with her. She's a Reagan appointee, if I remember correctly.
Oh, wow.
And she's been on the bench for a long time. She is, for those of you on my channel who watch my more philosophy content, she is a big natural law enthusiast. And, she's kind of the old school American judge, where she believes in American philosophy. She believes in the Constitution. She believes in individual rights. And she's aghast that, there are, the idea that just because the government has been doing the wrong thing for 30 years, that they should be forced to continue to do the wrong thing and let people out in this preferential way, gutting immigration policy. Like, imagine, people say, this is why I think this is such a big deal. People keep saying, oh, Trump's not deporting enough people. Oh, it's so expensive. Oh, it's not working, right? Well, holy shit, their lawyers have every incentive to make the hearings take a year and a half. And then they disappear because they're on bail and you can't find them. So yeah, you spend a year and $1 million trying to deport one guy and then he flees bail. And now you're left with a super inefficient system that's open to criticism. But that's because of a bad legal rule, right? And this can be fixed. And she's the type of judge who sees through that bullshit. Right.
We have our friend, potentially criminal Sean here, who you said you went through this case with. $5. Thank you. Over on Ryan's channel says the left's mad that Trump's finally doing the border security as the first step instead of screwing around on every other immigration proposal. I completely agree. That's why, for me, the Dreamers deal was a non-starter. And like, you could look at it in this sense, and it's like, well, what about some, because the Dreamers are like, through no fault of their own, as children, they were brought here, right? And so why should they be punished? Shouldn't there be some pathway for them to not be deported? And it's an argument that I'm willing to hear out, and I think most reasonable people are. The problem is, right, it's like, right, but a precursor to that has to be making sure more people like that don't get brought over, right? So that has to be done first. And instead, the Democrats were like, no, we have to deal with that. Then we'll hold as a carrot. Then we'll consider something about securing the border. And I think that shit's done. I think that's the jig's up. It's clear that the Democrats wanted these people to keep coming over, and that's why they continued to refuse to have a serious discussion about securing the border. So I agree with Sean there. I think that's why they're pissed, because now we see like, nope, we're done fucking around. We're going to secure the border. Then we'll start to look at what we're doing domestically with the illegals that are here. And I think that was the exact right way to do it.
Yeah, and look, I have no I have no problem with creating incentives for legal immigration, right? Like that's what we want, legal immigration. That's the good kind, right? But what you can't do is play this game where they say like, okay, we're going to create, let's say, the Dreamer program, a pathway to citizenship for people. It's no fault of their own. But why were they brought here? They were brought here because in most cases, the asylum system's broken. And the asylum system creates all these incentives for people to pretend that they need asylum because they can get into the country and spend years and years and years here before their case is ever heard. And then their kids here, and now they're a dreamer, right? So there's the fact that, like, yes, it would be good to have in any system, you want to punish people for doing the wrong thing and incentivize them for doing the right thing. That's not controversial. Right. But the problem was you can't just do incentives when there's all these counter incentives where people get all kinds of goodies for violating the law, for abusing the immigration system, for X, Y, and Z, and then think that one more carrot's going to do the trick. You have to actually stop the abuse, and then the carrots become meaningful.
Yeah. And I know we've talked about this like on a panel we did, right? Like it becomes annoying to listen to sort of the Democrats. I know we're showing our bias here, but I think this is just true, right? Like the argument's sort of like, shucks, we were just really terrible at our job during the Biden administration and other Democratic administrations, but the Biden being the worst. You know, oh boy, we're sorry the border leaked like a sieve and we kept claiming there wasn't a problem. And we stopped, like, all these sanctuary cities stopped cooperating to deport the worst of the worst. Like, it was all a big whoopsie. Right? It was just general incompetence. Like at some point you have to say like, no, this was intentional, right? Like it defies belief to think like, oh no, this was just a big old mistake for 4 years. Our bad. The 11 million illegals or so that came in and the stop cooperating with federal authorities to deport the worst of the worst. So yeah, I'm with you 100% there.
And I think, Rob, the next case, if you let me do the segue,
sure.
The next case that I wanted to talk about will put lie to this. So this is a name that you're going to want to remember if you're in the crowd. This is Judge Trina Thompson, who wrote maybe the worst decision I've ever read on December 31st, coming out of the Northern District of California. It's up there in the pantheon of truly bad legal decisions. But what I wanted to show you, Rob, to your point about this not being an accident, this case is about the TPS program. If you follow me and Rob, you saw that during the debate we had on Somalia and Somalian refugees, I brought up the TPS program as a problem and something that needs to be looked into. And if you know the lore, the TPS program gives temporary status to people. Now, who does it give status to? People who could not be here legally. So if you could be here legally, this doesn't apply to you. So everyone who gets temporary status would otherwise be illegal, right? That's point one. But we do it for humanitarian reasons. Let's say you have an earthquake in your country and everyone's dying and they're starving. And we say, okay, you know what? We're not going to deport you. You can stay here. But it's not forever. It's temporary. It's in the name, temporary protected status, right? Look at this history. This case was about Nepal, Honduras, and Nicaragua because the Trump administration tried to terminate temporary protected status for those countries. And just to Rob's point earlier about this is not an accident, let's see if you can notice a theme as we go through this fact pattern, right? So Nepal got TPS in 2015 because of an earthquake. Okay, they had a bad earthquake. I understand. I'm sympathetic. 750,000 homes destroyed. Terrible, terrible. We should do something. I'm sympathetic. All right. And then in 2016, what happened? It was extended for 18 months. All right. In 2018, notice Trump's in office. This is Trump 1. It was extended for several years due to legal challenges to its termination. So Trump tried to end it in 2018, but there were legal challenges and it got extended. And then in 2023, the Department of Homeland Security reconsidered and did not terminate it and instead extended it. Who was in office in 2023?
Yep.
Okay. And then in June 2025, they terminated it again. And that's how we got to this case. But there's more. What about Honduras? Well, they got temporary status in 1998, Rob. 1998, they got temporary status because of heavy rain and flooding. Okay. Very serious. No problem for me. 1999, they got an extension. Over the next 20 years, it was repeatedly extended. And then what happened in 2018? Trump tried to terminate it. But there were legal challenges to the termination that resulted in its extension for several years. And then in 2023, who was in office in 2023? They reconsidered. And now temporary status continues. And then in 2025, Trump tries to terminate. But wait, there's more. Nicaragua was hit by a hurricane in 1999. The TPS was extended for nearly 2 decades until Trump, because of recurrent weather events, until Trump tried to terminate in 2017. After the termination announcement, litigation resulted in the continued extension of TPS for several years. And then in 2023, always the same year, isn't that weird? In 2023, DHS reconsidered and extended TPS through 2025. And then in 2025, Trump terminated. So I don't know, Rob. Did you notice a pattern in this factual story?
It's unbelievable, right? And just to go with DHS data that I looked through, this is from the years of 2021, the Biden administration, basically. This is surreal. This is DHS data. 8% of Nicaragua, of their entire population, entered the United States in those 4 years. 8% of the entire country. 7% of Cuba, 6% of Haiti, 5% of Honduras. Like the amount of people from countries like this that came in as a percentage of the 8% of Nicaragua, like nearly 1 in 10, and everybody in the country came into the United States in that 10 years. And then what this case specifically, and you tell me if I have this wrong, the absurdity of this was it's not even, right? I hope I got this right. It's not even necessarily that Trump's team went in and shredded up some assurance that was given by Biden. It literally expired, right? It expired, and Trump's team's like, cool, we're just not re-upping it. And the court was, which clearly should be the rule of the executive, right? If the executive or the legislative says, like, look, we are giving a protective status for people in this country, surely it should not be that unelected courts are allowed to be like, no, you can't leave that expire. You can't do it. We as the courts have decided, nope, that must continue into perpetuity. Am I reading this wrong?
Oh, no.
How could a court, like, make that decision?
Rob, it gets so much worse. You're at the tip of the iceberg of this opinion, which is one of the worst pieces of garbage I've ever read. But to your point, you made 2 points I think are really important. 1999, 1998. These have been on this temporary status has been on the books for 27, 28 years. So yeah, in that time, you're going to get a tremendous number of people. And one of the things we've covered on this channel quite a lot is birthright citizenship. So think about this. In 28 years, how many kids did they have here? Well, all those kids are citizens. All those kids are citizens. That's 2 generations of citizens, right? So this is enormous to the population of these nations, enormous to the population of the US. It's a huge percentage. But the actual decision, Rob, is somehow even dumber than what you just said. It's worse than what you just said. Because let me show you how crazy this is. One of the first, they're very upset. They give a lot of history, but if you want to see a full breakdown, I have a full breakdown on my channel. If you want to see like line by line, you can come check it out, but that's not what we're doing here. We're trying to give you the highlights here. So part A of the decision, the first question, the Trump administration moved to dismiss. They said, you don't have jurisdiction to hear this case under 8 U.S.C. 1254 subpart A. Now, okay, that's a pretty big deal. If the court doesn't have jurisdiction, they can't decide this. That would be fatal. That's a pretty big issue. Now, why does the Trump administration think that they don't have jurisdiction? The court doesn't have jurisdiction. Well, let's see. Defendants argue that there is no judicial review of any determination of the secretary with respect to the designation or termination or extension of a designation under TPS. So the Trump administration has said, if we terminate a designation, to your point, Rob, we're not vacating it. It exists. We're not vacating it where, okay, it's supposed to go another 3 months and we're canceling that. It expired and we're just not re-upping. That's what terminate means in this context. There is no judicial review. That's what they argued. Now, why do they think that? I went to the law to look. Now, I know you're not a lawyer, Rob. This is a complicated legal argument. See if you can follow. This is what Congress wrote. There is no judicial review of any determination of the Attorney General with respect to the designation or termination of a designation. This is not a complicated legal argument. Congress wrote, there is no review. So there should be no review. You would think any self-respecting judge would read this and say, there is no judicial review seems like the sort of thing that might prevent me from doing judicial review. Rob, do you think that Judge Thompson read this and said no more judicial review? What do you think?
Of course not, because she's like so many of these judges, they're interested in writing the law. If it's a law they don't like, it doesn't matter if it's legal. They just say, we'll go beyond what's afforded to us in the Constitution as members of the judiciary, and we'll act like legislators and say, nope, we'll rip that law up. So that's exactly what this is, activism under the guise of, jurisprudence.
Oh, you Rob, yes. I mean, we're going to peel back the layers of the onion about how crazy this is, but you're 100% right. You called the ball in the air. So what did she do? She said, well, any determination for which I have no review should mean the single act of deciding. What's the determination? I can't review the decision, but surely I can review. But plaintiffs do not challenge the singular decision. They challenge the decision-making process. So, we're not challenging that Secretary Noem said terminate. We're challenging the way she thought about it. I mean, again, this is an argument only a lawyer could come up with, right? Like, you think that when Congress said, and again, I just want to show the chat because this is so clear, no judicial review. They said, oh, no. No judicial review for when they write it on the paper. But of course, you can challenge everything they did up to that point and say they were wrong to write it on the paper and that they weren't allowed to write it on the paper. But you can't challenge the writing on the paper itself. It's make-believe. I don't know what else to call it, Rob. This is insane.
I mean, if I'm trying to steelman her position, is what she's trying to say here, like the Trump administration's so corrupt or incompetent that if it would be a competent administration, then I wouldn't be allowed to review this. But because they're not, it's not that I'm reviewing the decision. I'm reviewing the corruption or incompetence of the people making the decision. Is that what she's attempting to say here?
Basically, yeah, that is the TLDR. But the crazy part about it is that wasn't the only ground. There's other parts of the law that prevented the decision. 1251 says no injunctions, and she issued an injunction. She doesn't care. She finds a way that she can do an injunction anyway. 1252. Also, what does it say? It says there are no conditions that the secretary must satisfy before she can exercise her authority. So whatever problems you have with the process don't matter because there are no conditions required. They can make the decision for any reason. Doesn't care about that aspect of the law. That's totally fine. The Administrative Procedure Act says that she can't make an Administrative Procedure Act ruling if a statute precludes judicial review or if the action is committed to the agency discretion by law, which this was. But she doesn't care. She blows past that one too. And then, surprise, surprise, after totally ignoring the law in 4 separate places, she rules against the Trump administration. I know that's a shocker to you, Rob. You probably couldn't tell.
Yeah.
But here's the cherry on top. And this is the thing that really black-pilled me. And then I'll give you the good news. I know this is the bad news, but I'll give you the good news in a second. After this 50-page nonsense opinion, again, if you want to see a full breakdown, check out my channel. I've got a video up. But at the very end, she writes a conclusion. And I've never seen a judge give a game away in the same way. Look, I just want to read you one paragraph. Our laws should not favor the loud and powerful simply because of their positions. The positions here being the president and his cabinet. You think that maybe the president and his cabinet have some say in the law, but no, we shouldn't favor them because of their positions. Yet for too long, our laws have overlooked the quiet truths, truths carried in the margins, truths lived but never spoken aloud. And here's the kicker. It is the duty of every public servant who are entrusted with shaping a more just society to bring those truths into the open, to translate lived experience into written protection. What's she saying? She's saying it is the duty of every public servant to do social justice work and to take lived experience, subjective experience, and transform it into written protection, i.e., law. She is openly saying that she views the role of a judge is to translate personal subjective experience into binding law that governs America.
Which is sort of the entire, like, the complete antithesis of what the law is supposed to be and what the role of a judge is supposed to be. Well, but my feelings are as such. So Constitution be damned, laws be damned. I'm going to put what I want the outcomes to be, and I'll make the law malleable to achieve that. It's surreal.
It's shocking, Rob. It's shocking. I mean, first of all, judges are not supposed to be engaged in making a more just society. Judges are supposed to be interpreting the law and the Constitution, right? If you want to make society different, talk to your congressman. That's what they're for. Judges are not supposed to change society. They're supposed to keep the boat on the water, right? Don't let the boat tip over. Keep the law. That's what they're supposed to do. But then this idea that she thinks there's a duty to translate lived experience into written protection. I mean, my jaw hit the floor, Rob. And this actually did black pill me quite a bit because I've been on the show and I've said, oh, judicial activism, I understand. It couldn't. And this is not every judge. Most judges I've worked with are not like this. I'm not going to call this the majority, but that's a crazy thing to write. I've never, that's open color revolution talk. Basically, where you're saying, we think that the law is whatever we feel the law should be.
It's unreal. And by the way, there's this thing that happens politically a lot, which is if there's a lot of accusations or if there's a lot of things that happen, then the specific details of them become irrelevant. And all that matters is, well, there has to be some fire there because look at all the smoke. One of the things I see over and over again, when you see decisions like this, it just gets lumped into a big, look at how many times the courts have ruled against Trump. Look at it, you see? And then, oftentimes you go through the details and you see stuff like this, you're like, this is a joke. When we have all these people in the legal system that adapt this mentality, which is just like, well, we personally believe that Trump's a loathsome person and that the policies he is doing are inhumane. And we're going to use our personal lived experience to fight back. Well, then all of a sudden it makes sense why it's like, oh, well, all of these cases go against Trump. And then as you know, and I bet this is where we're going to get here, I'm not quite sure, but oftentimes a lot of these lower rulings, as they get appealed up, the further up courts are like, no, this is laughable, and they overrule it. And I'm guessing that's exactly what happened here.
I mean, yes, Rob, you're psychic as always. The Ninth Circuit, not a famously Republican circuit. It used to be very left-leaning. Now it's 50-50 because there's been a lot of Trump appointees. But the Ninth Circuit overruled this travesty of a decision. But the thing about this is, imagine all the hoops this judge had to jump through to issue this ruling. 4 different segments of the law said she had no jurisdiction and bypassed them all in order to get where she wanted to go. There's no way Trump could win in this court. There's no way. Of course he lost. So he probably lost every case before this judge. And there's probably a handful of other judges like this one. And look, lawyers are sophisticated. Plaintiffs know if I want to bring a case, there's certain places to go. District Massachusetts, get Boasberg, go to Northern District of California. They know where the sympathetic judges are. But you got to take, so when you hear Trump loses 100 cases, okay, ask how many of them were appealed and how did that go, right? Because they're getting overturned. And this one got overturned very quickly. That was, on February 9th. So this is somewhat recent news. And by the way, this is what a legal opinion is supposed to look at, by the way, for those of you who are wondering. No fancy language, all legalese, just saying what happened. Well, They gave this order. What's the problem with the order? Well, if you scroll down, they give some background. They say, look, the order gave an injunctive relief against Trump. Now, if we're going to stay the order pending appeal, if they haven't decided yet, it's just whether they're going to stay the lower court order while they review. They need to decide, amongst other things, and the most important is whether the stay applicant has made a strong showing he's likely to succeed on the merits, whether or not it's likely that they're going to overturn that decision. And the first thing they said is, we conclude the government is likely to succeed on the merits. And then why? Why are they likely to succeed on the merits? Because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that the phrase no review is interpreted to mean review. Like that, it's not really more complicated than that. It's very, very easy. But then beyond that, they make a point that I think is very important. They notice that they're not writing on a blank slate because the Supreme Court, to your point, Rob, has twice stayed district court orders blocking TPS review for Venezuela. So the Supreme Court has had these things come up, and the court has said, no. This is nonsense. We're not doing that. It's nonsense. And the Ninth Circuit, because they're sane, has noticed this, and they said, well, if the Supreme Court's going to rule that way, we should rule the same way, because the Supreme Court's the law of the land. So at least there's some hope left, because if you have the whole judiciary corrupt, then you're out of luck. You're done. It's time to start impeaching people or talk about more drastic solutions. But here you have the Ninth Circuit remedying the problem, right? And they did it cleanly and simply, and they did it logically and lawfully. And that's what we want. And this is why, by the way, when people tell me, because, Rob, historically, I voted Democrat for a long time. And people say, like, how come you're fire breathing on the right these days and you're not trying to toe some kind of centrist line? And it's because of this. The Democrats have said they're going to pack the court. The Democrats have said that they're going to replace all these judges with judges they prefer. And I've seen what kind of judges they prefer, Rob. I've seen what kind of judges they prefer. And we can't have that. We just can't.
It's the last time we did a show, I actually think I was beginning to read this decision. Neither of us had read it because it came out like that day, I believe. Mm-hmm. You were going through a decision where, if people remember, basically you were like, good luck finding out what the facts of this were, because the judge is just like, he's quoting Bible verses and he's like wagging his finger, but he's not really explaining what the actual case was about. It just seems like he's standing on his soapbox saying, like, this is outrageous. And it's like, but what? When you have, like, I want to be very careful before I say what I'm going to say next, because I think even judges, justices, attorneys, etc., that massively I disagree with, like, on how they interpret the law and shit, that room should be given. Clearly, good faith people could have immense disagreements on the application of the law. But when you see things like this specific judge here, what is the recourse for, like, some sort of punishment for a judge that's just like, you know what, fuck you, I'm not even going to pretend that I give a shit. Like, if this just becomes the norm, because for her personally, this is going to get her invited to all the nice cocktail parties with the people on the left, and it allows the media to write these stories. Oh, Trump loses again in court. And as you know, NBC will be happy to write he loses. Probably aren't beating their chest as much when it's like, oh, by the way, that was overturned in short order. So, like, what do we do as a society if we see this increasingly happening? More and more justices or judges just like, I don't even give a shit. I'm just going to do whatever I feel like.
Well, this is why I call what I'm doing the reasonable right. Like, I think that you can't possibly support more of judges of this type being appointed to lifetime appointments. Lifetime appointments. They get to do this for the rest of their life. So the recourse is that you have to win elections, Rob. You have to win elections, because if you don't control the presidency, you don't control the nominations. It's really as simple as that. And there is a fight, and people, I don't know, sometimes this gets poo-pooed like it's only one issue among many, but for me, this is nearly a single issue voter status point for me. Originalism protects you against this kind of judge, right? If judges are originalists, they are attempting to implement what the law meant, not what they think it should mean in their imagination today. And you've seen You've seen originalist judges do not universally side with the president that appointed them. We've seen Justice Barrett side against Trump a few times. And she's originalist to her core because she's a judge first and she's not a political creature. That's the kind of thing we need. And if the left is going to persist in appointing these political radical subjectivists to the bench, I mean, that paragraph I read to you, Rob, like, I know you've seen the debates that Andrew Wilson has with people where he'll say to them, like, what's your grounding for that? How do you ground your ethic, right? That's the legal equivalent of what Andrew's doing. They say, like, well, how do you ground that out? And they're like, well, I think subjective truth should be law. It's like, holy shit, that can't be your legal theory. Like that there's no universe where that's an acceptable thing for a judge to say. It can't be the case. It's nonsense and everyone knows it. And if one party is going to continuously nominate this sort of judges, they have to be stopped. I don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah, and I mean, then you see on the counter to it, right? Like Trump can't even get, what is it, like a third of the attorney generals that he's appointed still haven't even came up for a vote. So to me, it's like, and again, this is less what this show's intended, but I'm just being honest who I am. It seems as if like the Democrats are shameless. We don't give a shit. We'll put any judicial activist we can in a position of power. And then the Republicans are like, well, we're going to honor the blue slip tradition. And if that means that we don't get to appoint any judges, so be it. And it really does show that if one side's willing to play this game and the other side's not, inevitably we lead to, I think it's a very damaging thing, because if people no longer have faith in the judicial system, really ugly things could happen. And I'm worried that, I don't think we're imminently there, but I think between this, a lot of the jury trials that you just shrug your shoulders, you're like, what the hell is going on? Sentencing decisions you see from justices, and now increasingly so many of these judges that we see that are like, just like, well, we hate Trump, so whatever goes. I think we're in danger of that, of the judiciary losing legitimacy.
Well, the good news is, while I agree with you, Trump's had a hard time appointing U.S. attorneys. He's had a phenomenal track record.
Oh yeah, I'm
telling
you.
Judges.
Yeah.
So like he has, the blue slips remain a thing, and that creates districts that lean one way or the other. And I agree with you on that. But if you think about one of for me, and I've been very open that I have many criticisms of Trump. I'm not somebody who glosses over his many faults, but his record on appointing judges is spectacular. I mean, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett have been spectacular Supreme Court picks. And I don't have the numbers, so I just put in AI, so take this with a grain of salt. But it sounds like that he's appointed over 60 judges to the appellate court and in his 2 terms, and over 200 judges to the district court. So this is a thing, even in his first term, where he kind of didn't do a lot of things he tried to do, he couldn't do in his first term. Appointing judges was a thing he's been strong on. Yeah. And I hope that he remains strong on, because quite frankly, this is the break. Like if the Supreme Court wasn't constituted the way it was during the Biden administration, we would have had a, vaccine mandate with the stroke of a pen across the country. We would have had student loan forgiveness with the stroke of a pen. Like they are the safeguard against radical shifts to the left. And, thank God for that. So, if there's a rallying cry for you, and if you're upset about various policies that Trump has, and I know I'm one of you, I often am upset with things Trump does, and you're trying to figure out why you should vote Republican in the midterms or in 2028, this is why. You cannot expect that you'll ever be able to reform a system if the judges just say everything's illegal if they don't like it.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're going to change direction just a little. This wasn't a pre-planned topic, but that's what makes this show fun. Something that was being said in your chat. There is a person in your chat by the name of Alishness. And I thought that I would address they, them now. Furry trans enthusiast. Alishness, a friend of our or of a mutual of ours, Wick. Now, I don't know if we talked about this on the show. I think we briefly did. Wick says that it's time to lie to ICE or to federal authorities and get arrested. I think we briefly talked about this, but very bad idea, right? You could choose to not cooperate. You could say, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah, I don't want to talk. I want my lawyer. There's things you can say. You can't lie.
Alishness called into my show. She's a fan of Wick, and there's two things that I want to address that they are making here, right? The first is this idea, and I think that this is actually good for the show to talk about this, the idea of censorship in the First Amendment. Can you explain for a minute about like how the First Amendment protects from the state infringing on your speech, not from like, for example, if you work for Microsoft and Microsoft says like, hey, we don't want you using curse words, they're allowed to do that. That's not First Amendment. It's only the state,
Yeah.
right?
The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments are all famously what we call negative rights. They prevent the state from doing things unless certain conditions are met, right? Like they can't regulate speech, they can't establish a religion. They're all negative. It's restrictions on government power. They're not restrictions on my power, right? Like if I want to try to censor you, Rob, I'm free to do so. Though of course I never would.
Now, the reason I bring this up was this person in a discussion with me. Now, you could agree or disagree whether or not this is tantamount to an actionable violation of the First Amendment, like the Twitter files, and the idea that our government sort of cooperating or pressuring social media companies to censor Americans' voices. Alice just says that no, the government's absolutely allowed to pressure social media companies to censor people for two reasons. One, social media is new, so that doesn't fall under free speech. Would you care to take a stab at that? That new forms of communication like social media wouldn't fall under your First Amendment rights?
No. This is what's called jawboning. And if you're, this is why, one of the things I was just talking about things I criticized Trump for. One of the things I criticized Trump for was the handling of the Jimmy Kimmel situation, because when the head of the FCC made the comments about Jimmy Kimmel Jimmy Kimmel's the stuff he said about Charlie Kirk was monstrous. Like I thought he was a terrible person.
Yeah.
But he said what he said, and the FCC made a veiled threat about the network. That's called jawboning, because the government hasn't actually censored Jimmy Kimmel, and they haven't actually censored the network. They've implied or implicitly or expressly threatened that they will if you don't do something. So they're trying to make you their deputy. They're trying to make you censor on their behalf and keep their hands clean. And that's what people were upset about with the Biden administration, because he was, the threat was social media companies. If you don't do this, then the government's going to start getting heavy handed with you. And that's where the jawboning comes in. So yeah, if the government threatens a private institution and turns them into their deputy in some way, either through threats, coercion, or money, they pay them, and then they engage in censorship through that company, that is still a First Amendment issue.
Right, and that it has nothing to do with, well, they're a private company, and so you're allowed to threaten them. That's absurd. The spirit of the First Amendment, and even the law of it, is the state can't pressure outside entities to censor your speech, right? The other thing is people, I think, wrongfully conflate the idea of what that means. So, for example, I'll hear people say this a lot. I'm anti-censorship. But then let's say they come in and they say, in my chat, and they start like, let's just say something simple. They start spamming in all caps. And I'm like, block. And then they say, well, wait a minute. If you're free speech, if you're a proponent of the First Amendment, you can't block people on your own channel, right? Like, can you talk about that for a second? Like the idea, the way I equate it's this, like, I don't think the government should censor people or have any part in censoring people for, let's say, being anti-Semitic. Right? They want to they want to be on public spaces and yelling about Jewish people, fine. But when I invite someone into my house, I'm allowed to be like, hey man, I don't want you just sitting here yelling about Jewish people. I'm going to ask you to leave. I really don't want that discussion in my house. It's sort of tantamount to that, right? Like you individually saying on your channel, look, I don't want this here, but that's not the same as, being for government censorship.
Yeah, I think government censorship is a different can of worms, because you can't escape it. If the government's censoring you, there's no hope. If you're saying, we don't take the Lord's name in my house, then I can choose to leave your house, or I can choose to abide by the rules of your house, right? I think what people often do is they confuse the legal right to free speech with a culture of free speech, right? The legal right to free speech is a very particular legal thing. Having a culture that supports free speech broadly doesn't mean that you're infinitely permissive of speech. No one is actually, and this is why I kind of hate it when people say they're a free speech absolutist. No one's an actual absolute,
nope.
Right? Like, that's not actually a thing. But it does mean that you try to allow for diverging points of view. But even that has limits. And I think that, like, if you remember back in like 2020, 2022, when everyone was getting canceled, right? One of the things that we misdiagnosed back then is we just didn't do the analysis right. There are things you should get canceled from your job per se. Like,
Sure.
I'm a lawyer. If I start posting on social media, God, know what I love doing? Stealing money from my clients.
Right.
My firm should fire me. Like, that's a crazy thing for a lawyer to say. And it's antithetical to their organization, right? You shouldn't say things antithetical. Like if a reporter was saying, God, I just love falsifying news stories. It just makes my day. You should get fired for that. What you shouldn't get fired for is doing something that's in line with your institution. And this all came out of the universities, you remember. And the problem that we had is that people were getting fired and censored at universities for taking opinions that were well within the bounds of academic discourse. And that's the problem.
Right.
It's not that there's no line. Of course there's a line, right? There's always a line. Every organization has a line, but the line should be in keeping with their mission. It should be about what the organization is, not some arbitrary free speech maximalist thing.
So just to let you know, Alishness over on Ryan's channel, whose comments I could see, it is true that I banned Alishness from my chat. The reason was Alishness, Ryan, is a Wick fan and not only supports Wick's idea of getting arrested, but goes further and says that you have a constitutional Second Amendment right and obligation to kill ICE agents.
I mean,
to pick up weapons because the Trump administration is tyrannical, and the Second Amendment says we have the right to bear arms against tyranny. And at this point, then it's time to bring those arms against. I choose to not have that language on my channel. That's why you were banned.
I mean, quite frankly, Rob, that's the line between that debate and Fed posting is awfully thin. Like I think I said on X, like that was, you would have to close your eyes and play dumb not to view that as a call to violence, and which is clearly against TOS. And I mean, if putting politics aside, why would you risk someone tanking your channel?
That's exactly, and
I mean, like that. Quite frankly, it could get you banned.
So I'm glad Alishness was here, because it does bring to a broader discussion of this, right? Which is what you'll see, and I'm not saying this is exclusively on the left. You'll see it on the right too, right? You'll see someone like, oh, Elon, you're for free speech. N-word, 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 N-word. Oh, you banned me. Oh, as if like X isn't going to have advertisers that are going to be like, nah, dog, we're not going to deal with that. But you see this on the left as well. It's the old Saul Alinsky. If they have a rule, then force them, make it ridiculous and force them to abide by the rule. Yeah, I'm not really interested in banning people all that much. But when you're going to Fed post, right? When you're going to come on my channel and say that, which quite literally not only could land you yourself in prison, the person saying that, but he easily could get a company like YouTube to be like, no, we're not going to allow this. And then get upset when the predictable response is, I'm not going to let you say that sort of shit. It sort of shows so much of what I see coming from Democrats at this point, which is that they'll push the issue, which then forces a reaction. And then they go, oh my goodness, can you believe the reaction? The best example I could give is a lot of these ICE violence against ICE, right? They'll blockade a street. And then when ICE is like, or, even at this point, domestic law enforcement's like, you can't do that. You can't do that. We're going to have to remove you. They go, oh my God, can you believe the tyranny here? I don't know. So I just
but put that in the context of the stories we covered tonight, right? Okay, you caught the illegal. Can you hold him on? Can you hold him in detention? Nope. Court says you have to release him. Okay, so now he doesn't show up. So you got to catch him again. Will the local authorities help you catch him again? Nope. It's a sanctuary jurisdiction. So if you're going to catch him again, you got to put boots on the ground. Can you catch one guy with one guy? No, you need a team. So now it's 5, 10 guys. And now they're in the streets. Oh, now we're going to protest that they're in the streets, right? So like the problem is it's friction and agitation at every level. And then when something like Renee Good happens, and it's very tragic and everybody's very upset about it, but you have to recognize that boots on the ground isn't anybody's goal. Like, listen to Tom Homan. He was delighted when Minnesota decided to start cooperating more and have less boots on the ground. It's inefficient. He would much rather have an orderly system No, the raids are not the point. The raids are the thing that the administration's doing because everything else has been stopped. Can you hold them in detention? No. Got to let them go. Do they come back for their bail hearing? No. Got to catch them a second time. You know, like, can we end TPS? No, you're not allowed to end TPS. You got to keep it. So eventually, you know, you use the tool that you have. But if the system starts making more sense, then raids are going to be less necessary. They're really a tool of last resort in most cases.
Yeah, so there you go, Alex. And just know this, like, if this is, again, a more political opinion than this show is usually about, but I literally, these people that do these sorts of things, I could not think less of them. Particularly if you're advocating for violence or you're advocating for people to break the law. I think that one thing we could do as streamers is understand that, much to my chagrin, sometimes people listen to us. I don't know why, but you know, you should have a duty as someone whose people are listening to not intentionally tell people to put themselves in situations like this that are grotesquely illegal, that will lead to negative outcomes for them legally. So I do not give a shit if those people get upset that I call them out or that I don't want them on my channel anymore. So I don't care, Alishness. You're welcome to watch from Ryan's end and complain, hey, everyone on Ryan's channel, hey, oh, fucks, Ryan's moderator, isn't Rob a terrible man? He's against censorship, but he doesn't allow me to Fed post on his channel. Yeah, I don't give a shit. Now go have fun at your furry they-them convention and leave me the fuck alone. So that's what I have to say to you.
Well, Rob, aren't you worried that you're going to miss all the substance that's brought to the table by Alishness in these debates? For the deep well of knowledge that she brings, you're not worried about missing out on that?
Now, the only thing I am worried about missing out on, and now they say, you know, you made 3 videos about me. Yes, your lunacy is something that I think is a cautionary tale for people to see. It absolutely is true that this is sort of the end result of what so much of the left-wing rhetoric is. Whipping people into a frenzy where they could publicly go on open spaces and literally call for violence against the federal government. It's fucking insane. So anyways, not to waste any more time on them, I thought that speaking of fun people that have called in, at least my show, and I'm sure you'll get a call in eventually. Good fan of the show. He's probably watching right now. Brian Shapiro. Now, we can talk about this both as the individual and then sort of as a
Sorry, problem. I have to mute. Hold on.
Yeah. Here we are. This is here's Brian Shapiro, a post he made that both Ryan and I were fans of. He says, the same people who claim they want physical evidence that Trump did terrible things to children are also the same people who shape their life believing in God with no physical evidence whatsoever. I say to all of you, take your fake Christianity and PDF enabling while burning in hell. I don't even know where to, like, okay,
did you break his brain? This is maybe the dumbest thing that's ever been said on the internet. And we just had a segment about some pretty dumb stuff that was said on the internet. But this is oh my God level dumb. I have no words.
I mean, first off, before you even get into the real substance, like, the contradictions in this are so funny. Not the least of which is Christianity's fake, but you're gonna burn in hell. Like, so, like, I hate to break it to you, but those two things are mutually exclusive. Yeah, I mean, it's laughable. I mean, this guy's laughable. He's a farce. It really is. So I don't know how much just to say, but to just laugh at this. Go ahead.
One of my favorite bits is he's admitting that he doesn't think there's any evidence, because he's saying, I think your Christian beliefs are so ridiculous because you don't have any evidence. But I guess I get to then say Trump is a PDF with no evidence. So it's a very strange point on a number of levels. But then also, and I know this is not like a religious philosophy channel, so we don't need to go deep down this road, but he doesn't seem particularly familiar with any of the arguments for the existence of God. Like, has he not heard of the argument from design, which is the argument that the whole universe is evidence, that everything is evidence, that everything we see and touch and breathe. So it's not like there's no physical evidence there. And then the thing that really struck me again, when you talked to him, wasn't he maybe I'm wrong, but wasn't he the guy who kept saying, show me the conviction? Show me the conviction.
Yes.
Show me the conviction.
That's constantly. Yes.
All right. So show me the conviction guy is now saying, Not only do I not need a conviction, I don't even need beyond a reasonable doubt proof. I don't even need evidence. I can just say Trump is a PDF for no reason, and if you don't like it, you should burn in hell. That's where he's at.
Well, and it's, I mean, to me, this is a tacit admission. This is his religion, which I believe. I do believe that so many of these lefties, they just take hatred of Donald Trump as their religion. They have it, the proof is irrelevant, right? They take it as a matter of faith that this man is incredibly evil and they must do everything possible. Just like a Christian might say, my life is about sort of living in the image of Christ and, saving my immortal soul. That's how they view hatred of Trump. It's the same. It dovetails nicely into the next topic we were going to talk about, though, which is sort of the Ro Khanna Thomas Massie story where they pressured the exposure of these 4 names that ended up not being whatsoever connected to Epstein. In fact, they were just happened to be 4 pictures and names that were put in a lineup, right? Regarding Epstein. So it would be the equivalent of this, right? Imagine that me and you, they're like, hey, you want to make an extra $20? Can we take your picture and put you in a lineup, with the guy that's actually guilty? Sure, why not? Right? And then all of a sudden, 20 years later, it's like, Ryan and Rob are in connection with this serial killer. It's like, no, you just used our photo in a lineup. We have no idea who that guy is. We were never in a room with him. We had nothing to do. That's in effect what happened. And I think before we get to that, what I wanted to take this Brian Shapiro post to show was, I think you're starting to see some of the rationale behind Trump. And even though I'm not a big fan, Pam Bondi, and a lot of that side's arguments like, now, wait a minute. We have to be careful releasing these files because what are the file? I've asked this of myself. I've asked this to my audience. I wanted the files released. That's true. But what did I mean by the files? I think I meant business connections, direct communications with Epstein, direct proof that people were engaged in terrible. I don't know that I meant anytime anyone made any accusation in the past 20 years, even if it was totally unsupported, even if it was just an anonymous call to some newspaper or law enforcement, I want that name released. That seems to be too much. And I think you're starting to see sort of the fruits of that, well, if we do that, the public is not geared to being nuanced. So many people are going to say, I don't like this person. Oh, there's their name. Fuck them. Guilty. They've done the worst things. And I think that you're exactly seeing that. I think Brian Shapiro exemplifies that. Proof be damned. I don't need proof. There's a name. There's a name I don't like. Fuck them. They did the worst things. And I think it's sad that we've gotten to this point, and I can understand the apprehension to release a lot of these files because of that.
Well, I mean, look, for lawyers who work in this area, this is no surprise. There's an illusion that there was a thing called the Epstein files. That was never there. There's no such thing. What there is millions and millions and millions of documents. Millions of documents. If you've never worked on discovery, it's hard to imagine this, but you'll see the same email. Matt, you have an email thread? Well, that's not one document. That's 10. Because every email is a different,
adds to it, yeah.
Yeah, so you millions of documents, and not all of them mean anything, right? Let's say that you, Rob, were drunk one night in 2013, and you called the FBI in a drunken stupor. Of course, this didn't happen. And you said, FBI, I saw Epstein in my backyard, and he was selling children. They're going to write down your name. They're going to write down the tip. They're going to file it. They're never going to follow up on it because it's nonsense. It's an uncorroborated tip. But now that would be released in the Epstein files because the whole file's getting released. Now, disclaimer here, this was a known thing. So Trump shouldn't have run on releasing these, and they shouldn't have advertised it. It was a huge mistake because they should have known better. But the truth is, there's a reason why law enforcement doesn't release investigative files typically, because it's a lot of mess. It's going to make a lot of people get dirtied up. But if they had a case, they would have brought the case, right? The idea that there's a new criminal prosecution coming out of these files is very low probability. If they could have bring a case now, why didn't they bring it 4 years ago, 8 years ago? They've had the files. So ultimately, yeah, it's going to be a lot of smoke. A lot of people are going to get dirtied up. And it's probably going to amount to mostly that. There's going to be some people who get embarrassed. I forgot there's a financier who resigned recently. So there's some people, yeah. there's going to be some people whose connections to Epstein are going to be exposed, and they're going to face social pressure, and they might get canceled. They might lose their company. They might X, Y, and Z. But I don't think it's going to lead to prosecutions, would be my guess.
Well, and like I see Imaginarium saying, well, yes, but they intentionally didn't bring cases because they're corrupt. Even if that's true, then the question would be, one, do you think they kept the files that prove that? Right? The very institution, the FBI at this point that's covering up for known PDFs, kept the, and they're like, ah, shit, oh, shucks, here's the videotapes. Sorry, we helped cover it up.
Mm-hmm.
But no, like, and so what's going to be released anyways? Is it going to include that stuff? And I sympathize, right? It sucks seeing powerful people get away with shit. And part of the files I really like the communications that don't necessarily have to do with sex trafficking, but are very elucidating on prominent people and the business and political connections that Epstein had all over the world. It's interesting. And even if it doesn't rise to the level of criminal, like, for example, one issue, this Mendelsohn guy who was the ambassador from the United Kingdom to the United States. I mean, there's shit in there from Gordon Brown's tenure where, like, 5 minutes after he's given access to confidential business, like political communications between the United Kingdom and the United States, he's on the horn with Epstein, like, okay, here's what you need to do. Pressure this PM, pressure this congressperson. That shit's interesting, even if it's not a crime. It's interesting, and I think that I'm glad we see that. But what happens is that then there's a lot of cannon fodder that gets brought up. And so this brings us to the Thomas Massie Ro Khanna. In this particular situation, what we have is this. There's a file that they're looking at that's redacted, has redacted names. And they're wagging their fingers saying, these names are powerful people that are probably connected to like some nefarious shit. We demand unredacting. We demand unredacting. And the law they passed is quite clear. You have to unredact it. So the DOJ finally says, fuck it, here you go. And they unredact. Well, these are like no name, these aren't even fucking wealthy, powerful people. They're no name people that had no connection. One of these gentlemen I heard, I don't know if this is true, but this is what I heard. He got fired. He was a mechanic, right? Like, imagine just being some fucking like Joe Schmo mechanic. And all of a sudden you go into work and you're like, you fucking dirtbag. You were on Epstein's Island. You did this and that. And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And Ro Khanna reads your name, right? And then all of a sudden, now this guy's retained a lawyer. Apparently he got hired back and like but is there a potential at this point? Because I know you have the speech and debate clause that like basically is a congressperson, and you can talk about that for a second if you want, but is there a potential civil case that goes beyond that where it's like, yeah, criminally you can't be held as a congressperson for saying what you want, but civilly possibly you could get sued?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, so my first question is, did they read it on the floor, right? It wasn't like they just had a press conference. They read it on the floor?
I believe so, yes.
So I haven't. This is not an area of deep expertise on it, so I'm going a little off the top. But I actually think I think you're going to be immune from civil damages too. I don't think that you. I think the speech and debate clause is going to extend even to a civil lawsuit for damages for defamation or whatnot. Because if you remember when what's her name? God, I'm blanking. One of the Republican Burnett who's always posing with AK-47s.
Oh,
Bobber?
No, or Mace.
God, I'm blanking.
I know who you're talking about.
I'm blanking. But she remember she went on the floor and then she read this thing about how one of her exes was sexually inappropriate with her and gave this whole public statement. And the reason she does it on the floor is that it insulates her from potential liability in case she said something that wasn't true, whatnot. And of course, they give you media attention as well. But yeah, my understanding is that this is probably going to be an absolute bar of immunity, though I haven't researched it, so I could be wrong.
It's crazy. It's really as crazy. Even aside from that, though, whether or not there'll be legal ramifications, it sort of shows. And look, there are those Congress people, right, that you expect this more from. Like you could see Maxine Waters or Marjorie Taylor Greene or Nancy Mace. You're like, but like Ro Khanna or Thomas Massie seem to be I'm not saying they're not partisan, but they seem to be a little more stable. And to see them like just coming out and be like, here's names of people, like that's really dangerous shit. Like it really can negatively affect someone's life. So you want to be sure. By the way, this is true even not from a legal sense. I
Yeah.
said this during the whole Pizzagate shit, right? Where it was like, listen, you have to be real fucking careful before you're making accusations like this about specific people. It's one thing to say, I in general believe that high powered people are doing really fucked up shit, right? It's another thing to be like, this guy, this guy's doing it, right? Especially if it's not like a public figure. If it's just some random Joe Schmo, it's a mechanic. Fuck
Mhm.
that guy. That guy did this. And if you're someone with an audience, like a congressperson or a media member, etc., and you say that shit, the power imbalance is such that that guy's going to have no ability to really defend himself, probably. And it could lead to a lot of horrible negative consequences for people.
Well, I mean, I think we as a society need to get better at this. We need to figure something out because, look, the Epstein stuff is obviously horrifying. It's obviously salacious. It's obviously going to get a lot of attention. And anytime you accuse someone of sexual impropriety, it's always that way. But we've seen now that a lot of these accusations don't hold up to scrutiny. Did you ever watch the show Leverage?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, that was a guilty pleasure show with me and my wife. It's a fun, heisty type show, a lot of fun. In Leverage, Timothy Hutton was the lead, and he did a great job. He kind of held the cast together. He's a very, very good actor. They rebooted the show. They had the reboot, and he wasn't in it. And the show was terrible without him. Why wasn't he in it? Well, he had been accused of horrible sexual crimes in Canada, horrible, graphic, evil crimes. Now, it turns out that when it was investigated, the Canadian police said there was absolutely no evidence supporting this, and they dismissed the charges. But by the time the news cycle had turned, right, and now he's a vicious sexual criminal, and he doesn't get his show, and he's done, he's canceled, it's over. And the accusation is headline news. The retraction is page 36. And 10 months later, and nobody cares. And that is a problem right now because people can get a lot of attention by essentially putting, PDF jackets or similar labels on people. And, we're seeing that time and time again that these accusations, sometimes it's true, but a lot of the time they don't hold up.
So here's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to single out this person, but this is the mentality. If they're innocent or the claim has no merit, just unredact the names. Why redact the name? You see, if you didn't do anything, who gives a shit if your name shows up in the files? Then you could just calmly say, oh, but I'm innocent. I didn't do anything. And everyone will go, oh, fair enough. That's not how it works, right? And that's why a lot of people are fighting. It's the same with the Diddy files to a lesser extent, right? Like, there's probably going to be the vast majority of people that ever were like at a party with Jeffrey Epstein didn't do shit. Not only did they not do anything sexually, they probably didn't even have business relationships or anything with them. It's just like a social acquaintance or something of that nature. The problem is that at this point, two things are true at the same time. One, this was a rich, powerful man that did some really fucking heinous shit, and he got away with it for a long time. And people have reason to distrust our system, in part because of that, for a bunch of other reasons. And secondly, there's a lot of people that are going to be named that didn't do anything, particularly of these sexual crimes, right? How do we reconcile that? Because what the tendency is going to be from people on all sides, and look, it's way worse on the Democrats, in my opinion, but the same's true of the other side, right? Like right now, if it comes out, if there's an accusation, for example, against Barack Obama specifically, every fucking right winger is going to go, oh, look at that. Look what happened. Now, it doesn't matter if you get into the finer details of that and it says this was an anonymous tip to the FBI, right? Doesn't matter. The right's going to be like, oh, there it is. There it is. And it's like, that's bad enough, but you understand it for Trump, Obama, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, George Bush. But when you're talking about Jim Smith, the auto mechanic, it's like, what the fuck are we doing? And I think that not only is it dangerous for them, but I think what happens is people like me start seeing it like this, and this is also the wrong reaction. Holy shit, there's so much fucking bullshit to sift through. I don't even have the stomach for it. So if there is a kernel of like, look at that, deep in these millions of files, here it is. Here's somehow something that you're like, wait a minute, this is a person that should have been prosecuted. But it gets lost in the shuffle because to get there, you have to sift through 200 names. That's just like, well, here was a name. And so it's, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what do you say? To me, I find it very similar to the like, well, if you're not guilty, who gives a shit if your name's read? It's very similar to the like, who needs a right to privacy? If you got nothing to hide, who gives a shit, right? Who cares if the government's reading your emails? You didn't do anything criminal, did you? No, we value that sort of privacy and not being speared in this ways because in itself, that is something that we should have a right to. It's not just, well, if you're innocent, you shouldn't give a shit about it.
Well, I mean, look, if you took that guy, I forgot his name, right? But if you went on X and you were like, that guy fucks pigs and I have proof, right? And then he quoted that proof, I don't fuck pigs. How do you think the rest of his day is going to go?
Yep.
Like it's going to, like you, at a certain point, the accusation is damaging in and of itself, especially when you're talking about really heinous stuff like what Epstein was involved in. But this is why I think that the Epstein files are going to end up, look, I said it earlier, we got into this mess because there were promises made and then they tried to walk it back. Yep. And then that prompted, congressional action. And now we're in a universe where the law requires disclosure, but it's never going to be enough. It's never going to be enough. I'm telling you right now, this is going to be our generation's JFK, right? Like this is going to be the thing, like the people who say no, because like, if you're one of the people who say, no, the reason no other charges were brought is because there were people behind the scenes wielding power and influence. Okay, you might be right, by the way. I don't know. I can't tell. I don't know. But how could I ever prove you wrong is my actual question. And the answer is I can't. Like if they released all the Epstein files, then it's going to be like, well, what did they hold back? What's the thing we know? And it ultimately becomes everybody picks their favorite theory. And no amount of evidence will change their mind. Like Brian Shapiro doesn't fucking care about the evidence. He made it very clear he doesn't care about the evidence, right? And like, for example, like one of the things that came out in the Epstein file was that Trump turned Epstein into the police in 2006. So he said, thank God you've caught him. He's doing all these horrible things. Did that change anybody's mind?
Nope.
No. If you think Trump was on Epstein Island doing bad things, you still do. If you think Trump wasn't, you still don't. No, it doesn't change anybody's mind. It's just one more data point for people to ignore.
And I think it's a lesson in this. Like, it's sort of, when we started this show, one of the things Ryan and I talked about was this. Like, I'm more on the side of like, fuck it, tear it all down. Ryan's more on the side of like, look, we also have to focus on building back up, right? If you see a house and it's, it's decaying, right? It's condemned. In order to build a good house there, you first have to like get down to the foundation, demolish to the foundation, and then build back up. And so I'm usually coming at things from more the like demolish it, and Ryan of like, that's fine, but you can't go too far and you have to worry about building it back up. I think this sort of speaks to the dangers of my ideology sometimes, which is like, look, if you just go in and you kick down the doors and you're like, fuck it, we don't care, things are so corrupt. Well, that leads to bills like Massey and Ro Khanna's. Right? And good will come out of that. I think there are good things that we're seeing out of it. But there are estimations that there's some like 350 million files. Right? Now think about that. Like you were saying, because a file might, if me and Ryan have a 20 email exchange, that's 20 files. There's the first one, then there's his response to me and the first one, then there's my response to that, then his response. You see, each of those are an individual file. If there are 350 million, right, this is apparently like what Massey and Ro Khanna's like defense to this is. Well, the FBI and Pam Bondi and company should have came to us and said, here's why that name specifically is redacted. Okay, 350 million files worth of that? Every time you go through something, you're like, there's a blacked out name. I demand a meeting with Pam Bondi right now. Why the fuck on file 2,173,386? 3 sentences down, is there a name redacted? Who the fuck's that? We demand to know right now. And you start to see the insanity of this. You're like, holy fuck. So when their bill's just like, fuck it, unredacted all, okay. And then when you read their names out loud like Ro Khanna and then go, well, it's not our fault. It's Pam Bondi's fault. She should have explained to us exactly who these people were as we were demanding and basically accusing her of helping cover up for Epstein by having these names redacted. Is there a potential? I mean, I wouldn't put it beyond Bondi and company. I'd understand why they do it, but I wouldn't put them beyond it to be like, okay, motherfucker, fine. Then we'll release these names, assholes. Now, how do you feel? Right? And then them going, but this was malicious. Maybe so. But it sort of highlights the point where it's like, look, this is the dangers of just being like, fuck it, convention be damned. And there are laws on the book, correct me if I'm wrong, or at least if not laws, judicial norms. They're like, look, in these instances where you have like a grand jury and evidence and charges aren't brought, you don't release the evidence to the public because of this exact scenario.
Oh, they never release. Like, if they don't bring charges, they never release the evidence of the investigation. Like, the investigatory file is kept private for exactly this reason, that it's hugely embarrassing to people to have their names linked to these scandalous events, especially if there is not sufficient evidence to bring criminal charges, right? Now, will good come out of this? Yeah, I think we'll probably find some people who deserve to be shamed and deserve to have their name dragged through the mud. But a lot of bad's going to come out of it. We're going to have people who are dragged through the mud for no reason. Like you said, like Rob, imagine, because I've done this before in my line of work. Imagine there's that email exchange you were talking about, right? It's 10 levels deep, so there's 10 copies. But email servers back things up in duplicate and triplicate. It's on your phone. It's also on your Gmail. It's also on your laptop, right? So it's on my phone and my Gmail and my laptop. So it's actually 60, right? Now, every time the name shows up, you have to redact the name. But humans, AI, whatever tools you use, errors are made. What if you forget to redact the name on the 59th? And then somebody goes, oh, Sam Klein, that motherfucker. Look, they forgot to redact his name. I've got the story of the century. And they talk about Sam Klein in the Epstein file. And then he turns out, he's Epstein's plumber. And, and now, now he's going to have that experience. So, there's going to be real harm to real people because of this norm being altered in this case. But quite frankly, it was at a, tensions were at a breaking point. I don't know what else there was to do. People were so sick and tired of this being a political football and the way that it was promised and then taken away from them, that something had to give. I think this is going to be a shitty process and it's going to play out in a shitty way. And that's going to be what it is. It's just going to be shitty for a while.
Ultimately, I think more good than bad will come out of it. I do. I think that I do err on the side of these corrupt motherfuckers will protect each other, and that there's, even if not evidence of sexual improprieties, there is evidence that in governments around the world that there's way too much influence with shitty people like Epstein. Right?
Actually, to be honest with you, I'm more interested in that.
Me too.
If you can catch anybody, you can prosecute them, of course, do it. But what I really want to know, because Epstein was not he was a sexual deviant and a motherfucker, but that was really that's his hobby. His business was information and influence peddling. And remember that video we saw where he called the representative from the Virgin Islands when she was on the floor of the Senate and Congress, and had her read what he texted her during a hearing. So this is a man with substantial influence. The thing I'm waiting to hear about is less the names, though I understand why people are interested in that, and more what it was his web of influence. Who did he have his fingers in? That's what I think is really interesting. But maybe that'll be a year or two down the road once the initial scandals blow over.
And there's, I've been talking about this a lot. There's a lot of different things in the files. I don't know how much stake to put in, even if it's someone I immensely dislike. Like, I have no love for Joe Biden. If a file comes out that's like, Jane Doe reported to the FBI's tip that Joe Biden did these heinous things, to women on the island, I don't know what I could do with that. I'm just like, it's just a fucking accusation with no proof. But when we see emails directly from Jeffrey Epstein to, Reid Hoffman or to Noam Chomsky or to Prince Andrew, it's like, okay, this is more interesting. This is, even if not the level of a crime, it's like, okay. Now, by the way, it doesn't mean that Epstein's telling the truth, right? Epstein could have got pissed at, me because he don't like the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he saw me talk about the Steelers and be like, yeah, I heard Rob Noerr's like, piece of shit that murdered someone in Puerto Rico. It doesn't mean I murdered someone in Puerto Rico. He could be full of shit or mistaken. but at least there's something there that's more than just accusation and innuendo. It's like, all right, there's something here, at least that this dude that. So I agree with you. I think there is different levels of stuff to get out of these files, and partisanship be damned. I don't give a fuck, right? Like if it's, but if it's right wingers or Trump or whatever, fine. Like, but some of the shit. It's like, I mean, it's so easy to jump in with both feet to this. I saw Michael Tracy talking about this. There was this one file where I'll be very careful here. I don't want to violate TOS. A prominent person, there's an email, and if you just look at this chunk of the email, it's like, says something to the effect like 7, 8 years old, accused me of making a certain part of their body bleed. And everyone's like, holy fuck, a 7 or 8 year old? Well, then what this was from a court transcript where a gentleman's lover, adult lover, girlfriend he'd been with a while, tried to sue him and lost, and alleged abuse that had occurred 7, 8 years ago. Right? So in context, you're like, oh, he's talking about a 7 or 8 year old. No, he's talking about an accusation from 7, 8 years ago that was tossed out by a court about his actions with an adult woman. Right? But that's the sort of shit that happens. It's like, oh, fuck. Now, fuck this guy. I know who that guy. I'm not going to say it here because I'm not trying to smear more. It's not a guy I particularly like anyways. But nonetheless, you see the problem? You remember the famous one that came out where it was like Epstein said, Trump's the dog that's not barking. Yeah. He was in a room with redacted. Well, once you found out that redacted was Virginia Giuffre, who had publicly said Trump tried to help me, he did nothing wrong, right? All of a sudden it's like, oh, Epstein's trying to figure out who ratted him out. And he's like, who we haven't heard from? Fucking Trump. And he was with one of the alleged victims. In other words, did he rat me out? And yet there were millions of people, including people that were like, hey, I'm kind of a Trump supporter. This is
and it turns out he did. He did rat him out.
And but in context, you were like, oh, this looks bad. And then when you see that, so it's like, man, it's so fucking bizarre. And it's, by the way, we're on the cusp of this. Where will we be? Have you seen these videos of like Seed Dance, like 3.0, like the AI? What are we going to do like 10 years from now where there's like, there it is. There's footage of Epstein with Bill Clinton right there. I saw it with my own eyes. And it's like, yeah, man, that's AI. Like, and no one's going to know. Everyone will see it. You're going to
have to find the sources you trust because it's going to be a wild world out there, Rob. I will say though, I know that we've talked a lot about the chaos coming out of this. The Musk email was really funny. Do you see that one where
he's like chicken wings or whatever?
Musk was trying to get invited to Epstein Island, and then Epstein like blew him off. That was kind of amazing. That's fucking cinema right there.
It's very, very funny. All right, so there's other thing. If anyone has super chats of topics we haven't talked about, please let us know. If there's other things. I know you were interested in this Mark Kelly situation. So Mark Kelly was, for those that don't know, he's one of the seditious six, right? And as someone who was formerly in the military, his pay was basically put on hold because he's held to a higher standard as a former member of the military. Basically, the implication is telling members of the military to disobey orders. There's now been a stay put on that freezing of his income.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because we've been talking about, we called this a month, I don't know if it was months ago or 6 weeks ago, so when we were talking about when this story broke, that, okay, they said some stuff that I don't think they should have said, but the First Amendment's going to cover this by and large. But for Kelly, he's a retired captain. He holds a military rank. And for those who don't know, the military gets their retirement based off their rank. And there's a provision in the code that allows the Secretary of Defense to reopen the status under which you retired. Like, is captain the right rank? Should you have a lower rank and get less retirement money? And the only standard in the law is good cause shown. And so that Pete Hegseth said this is conduct unbecoming of an officer, and opened up proceedings to readjust his status, and that would lower his retirement benefits. Now, this is not available for the other five people the other five Congress people who were saying stuff about the Venezuelan boat strikes, but for Mr. Kelly, it was. And yeah, the court stated. What's going to be fascinating, though, and I don't think there's any clear case law of this. I think that this is a wide open question. In the military, you don't really have First Amendment rights. Like, if your superior officer says, you boys get in the line and start digging trenches, and you say, fuck you, officer, I'm not doing that. And he says, okay, well, then you're going to be run laps till you fucking bleed. And he's like, nah, I got my First Amendment rights. You can't punish me for my speech. It's like, nope, they sure can. The question is, does that same standard apply to retired military who still hold the rank, who still are benefiting from their retirement accounts? Or does it apply in this case? Because even if it doesn't apply generally, when Mark Kelly was talking about these are illegal orders, in his opinion, what was his basis for saying that? His expertise as a military man. He was invoking his military expertise when he made his statements. Does that count? And I don't think there's any law in this. Certainly the court that reviewed it said there was no law. And they just said, well, there's no law, so we're going to stay because we think that's right. But that means this is wide open on appeal. And we're going to have to watch this carefully because I don't think we know whether or not the First Amendment protects Mr. Kelly's statements. And this is likely to go up on appeal and maybe go all the way up to the court.
Yeah, it's rough. I'll tell you this. It's my fucking chagrin to say this. I think he should probably get away with it. I think what he did, the remedy for it should be political. That's my feelings. Now, to the issue of not receiving pay, I understand the threshold's different. But I think you're well aware, it seemed to come out that there was an attempt to go to a grand jury for all 6 of these people.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually don't agree with that. As much as I'm like, fuck these people, we need to be more aggressive legally. I think I probably agree with the grand jury in this sense. I don't mind Trump's team trying, I guess, especially given that I may have said something different 8 years ago before the lawfare against Trump and everything connected him, but hey, fuck it, gloves are off now. But I think that this is something that it's clearly, the implication's clear of what they're doing. We want you to refuse to do things like bomb Venezuelan boats. We want you to refuse to do things with ICE. But I just think that should probably be protected. That's basically how I feel on it,
I agree with you. I mean, in the military context, it might be different. But if we're talking about the first 5, and in terms of criminal charges, I 100% agree with you. That's not sedition. It does not rise to that level. And furthermore, the First Amendment issues are striking, and that should be protected. And I actually would go one step further. It does bother me that they went to the grand jury in that case. And look, the grand jury threw it out, and the grand jury was going to throw it out. So in that case, the guardrails held fine. Here's my problem with it. I often, because I'm a lawyer and I talk politics online, find myself in the position where, let's say I'm on Wick's show, right? And someone's saying to me, well, ICE has had, 4,000 cases that turned out against them. These are lawless agencies. And I say, wait, hold on. Have you read the Thompson decision? Have you read what some of these judges are doing? Have you seen how often they get overturned? And I'm trying to establish some credibility, right? That's what I'm trying to do. It doesn't help me if you're bringing bullshit cases that you can't win, right? Like, I get your point that you can test the system and the guardrails didn't allow for it. Okay. But it makes the administration look less credible. And I don't think they should be spending their credibility on losing fights like that. I think they should save it for fights they could win.
Yeah, especially where I think there's, even in the area of sedition, right? There's fucking people that have came out with that are on these signal chats, right? In Minnesota, where they're literally setting up blockades, preventing ICE. Those seem to be better uses of the idea of sedition if you're going to aggressively go after people. So, yeah, ultimately, I'm not a big fan. Look, fuck these Democrats in the sense that the lawfare that they cheered on. I'm sorry, this is the world you've created. It's going to get worse from here before it gets better. That's just the way it is. But yeah, as someone who wants actual corruption to be weeded out, I don't think this is a good use of time. And I think you're right. It makes it more difficult to say well, when they bring files against or charges maybe against someone we agree with, like Don Lemon, right? Now they're but look, this is just like the Seditious Six, same shit. And now me and you could parse through it and say, no, here's the difference. But will the average public, or will they just be these last cases were bullshit, so this is probably bullshit too?
And it also, it's bad optically, and it's confusing, and it blurs important lines. Like, for example, like I 100% agree. Like criminal charges for the seditious acts, no, that's off limits. First Amendment, even if it was sedition, First Amendment would cover it. But Kelly is in a different. I mean, he goes by Captain Mark Kelly.
Yep.
When he said you can refuse illegal orders, you must refuse illegal orders. You know, he was relying on his expertise as a military man. He was saying basically, at least implicitly, as a captain, as a man of military rank and expertise, this is what I think. That is very different than a civilian saying, well, here's my 2 cents about military law. Like, well, what the fuck do you know? You know, like civilians don't know what military life is about. I don't think it's crazy that he would be held to a different standard. But I know that said, it's tough to take away a guy's pension for a thing that's like a new legal theory, right? Like, you know, it strikes me as almost unfair on some level where you're just saying like, well, come on. Like if he didn't know that was the rule, then can you really do this to him? But I guess we'll find out.
This comment, I think, is worth addressing. Again, Rob says the average public, like he is something elite or something to be set apart. Well, I'm certainly not elite, but I am something to be set apart. You want to know why? I have a show with an attorney that I talk to every 2 weeks going through legal cases. The average person doesn't do that. In fact, the average person isn't watching social media people like us that are heavily interested in this. I'm not denigrating the average member of the public. In fact, in many ways, they're probably smarter than Ryan and I and everyone that's watching. They have better things to do. I guess you could say, what I'm saying here, it's not to say that they're less intelligent. It's just that most people aren't spending their time saying, oh, here's a court case. Let's read the brief. Let's read the files that were submitted. And that's things that I tend to do. As such, what happens is like, you know, this was probably, tell me if I'm wrong, if you agree with me, Ryan, this is probably one of the most common beliefs of just like a member of the public that doesn't, nothing's ever going to happen with this shit anyways. Fuck it. I don't even care to look at it because nothing ever gets done. So fuck it. You know, well, now, is that person then going to be like, oh, look at that, a new filing in the Mark Kelly case. Let's take a look at that. Probably not. You know, it's not an insult to them. It's just people have things. You're a carpenter. You're worrying about your project you have going on at work tomorrow. Ryan's an attorney, right? That's different. He's looking at court cases. Like if you're someone who's like, you know, races and like local races, you're probably more up on the Daytona 500 or, you know, or something like that than someone like Ryan and me, because it's just to us, it's like, oh, just a passing interest that we heard. So that's what I mean. It's not an insult to average members of the public, nor is it saying that I'm smarter than them. It's just saying my interest diverges from them and that I'm probably paying more attention to this stuff than them.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't need to be an insult, but you watch Rob's show for a reason, right? Like, surely you watch the show because he's entertaining and has some insights that you think are worth knowing. So if you didn't think that, I don't know why you'd be watching the show. It would be my first.
Well, even if you're watching a show like this, you're probably, I would separate you from the average public because I will guarantee, regardless if you agree with Ryan and I or not, you now know more about those first two court decisions than 99% of the public that Ryan went through and showed you the actual, right? So like, that doesn't mean like, oh, that must mean you have a higher IQ or you're morally a better person. No, you just have an interest that separates. And oftentimes what happens is, this is true of a lot of things politically, not just in the legal aspect, right? For example, a lot of people won't have nuanced opinions of like, well, why is the economy doing what it's doing? Oftentimes completely out of the president's control, right? And yet, the average member of the public's like, we elected person X, economy sucks now. That's person X's fault. That's how it's looked at. And, you know, and an economist might be like, well, now, wait a minute. This was something, you know, this is the dot-com bubble. This has been leading up for 8 years. It's not really W. Bush's fault here, but don't matter, right? People are like, yeah, you know, that's not getting through to the non-economists. So.
Well, and you made this point earlier about AI, Rob, but as we get increasing levels of sophisticated disinformation, propaganda that's going to be flooding us, that looks real and you can't tell it apart, it's going to be really important that you find voices that you trust who are spending time parsing through it and saying, no, it turns out that's an AI video, right? And that's not to say that it's like a unique or special skill set, to Rob's point. It's not an IQ contest, but, you know, Rob does this full time. So, you know, he's going to have looked at the information for more time than you have, and that's why you're watching a show, hopefully. So I don't think it's an elitist thing. I think it's literally, like my pipes froze during the cold weather. I had to call a plumber. I didn't call a random guy. I called somebody who I knew was really good at plumbing, right? Not because he's smarter or better than me, but he's better than me at plumbing, right?
Yeah.
I needed help. That's how it goes.
And even to take it away from the hypothetical, just take it to the literal. Like, is there a difference between the charges against Don Lemon versus the hypothetical charges against the Seditious Six? Yes.
Yeah.
But it's someone who's not heavily looking into either of those. They may literally just be, this would not be an unfair opinion, I don't think, from a general member of the public. Hey, Trump's team aggressively went after these Congress people, and I think that's bullshit. And Don Lemon's a member of the press, and he's just reporting on some shit. And here they are going after him, too.
Yeah.
Just like bullshit like that last case. Well, no, that's not the case. There is a lot more to that Don Lemon story. So what I'm saying is, when you're in politics, you have to understand that not everyone's going to have a super detailed understanding of everything you're doing. And so oftentimes the optics are very important. So from the perspective of that, I think both what Ryan and me are trying to say is like, look, you should be careful if you're Trump's team haphazardly charging people, because what it does is it diminishes your credibility with members of the public. And for that matter, it could be diminish your credibility with people that are attorneys or people that, in other words, public perception oftentimes matters more than the details.
This matters a great deal. I don't know if you saw this story, but I think it was like last week. A member of the Trump team was recruiting for lawyers to join, like become AUSAs on X. That's a very bad look in the legal community, because that's a prestigious job. You shouldn't have to advertise that job. People should be begging you for that job, right? And the signal that sends is not a good signal. Now, I don't know exactly why they did it. I don't have the inside scoop on that or anything, but these optical points do matter, right? It does matter that there's some level of public trust. And if you really think about, like, we talk about ICE all the time, like, what's the goal of the agitation? It's to erode public trust, right? These are what I saw a congressperson refer to the detention centers as death camps earlier today. Why? Because they're hoping that members of the public who don't think about this stuff very carefully are going to hear the word death camp, and that's going to sway their opinion. Now, does it make any sense? Is it based in reality? No. But that's the game. There's people who are engaged in propaganda, and we all have to sift through it. So here we are.
This is just a shot in the dark, not really a legal topic, but I wonder the legal ramifications of this potentially. So there's big news breaking today in New York City. On a lot of the streets, there was just a huge, loud broadcast call, like Islamic call to prayer, right? And it's pissing a lot of people off. When it comes to religious protections, like through your First Amendment, are there potential challenges to, like, yes, but you can't exercise in a way that's considered like a nuisance to the public? I don't know. What do you think? Like, is there, if enough people got upset and were like, look, this, bothers us or whatever, it's a disorderly conduct in the sense that it's loud and what's the potentiality of that?
Yeah, I mean, there are things called time, space, manner restrictions where, like in the free speech context, like you can put in regulations that say, you can't have loud house parties at 11 o'clock at night in a residential neighborhood. Like, is that their free speech? Yes. They could have a rock concert. That'd be free speech, but it's the wrong time. It's the wrong place, right? Now, what I have never researched whether Islamic calls to prayer, what level of protection they get. I would imagine my guess would be the same level that church bells get, right? Like church bells are quite loud. But if you would assume there's a limit there. Like if you took the church bells and then you rigged up a megaphone system and you put it all over, so it's just the church bells were just dominating a 15 block area, that might be a problem. So I think there's probably a limit there, but I don't know exactly where that is, nor do I know, to be honest with you, how loud this call to prayer actually was. I'm certainly I know there's areas in Brooklyn that have calls to prayer that I've been in. I've not heard of that in Manhattan before, but I guess that's new.
Yeah, I just was reading about it today, and I saw people like, "Oh, take this to court," and I was like, I don't even know. My guess is this is my layman's guess of this, that it would be like, of course, there are things that are go above and beyond. Like if I want to just like at 3 a.m. start shouting, I love Jesus Christ, and here's my prayer. Like the cops can be like, nah, dude, you can't do that.
Yeah.
But there's sort of a reasonableness to it. If it's an official thing and it's like not intentionally designed, like if you're just blocking the street praying, I understand that's a bit much. So I would think that there's probably not likely to be a legal challenge to this. One last thing, I'll let you go on this. SAVE Act, right? So forget about all the provisions of it, just the idea of like presenting ID to vote, etc. There's now talk that they'll end the zombie filibuster. It's complicated what that means. But if it was to get passed, do you think that we would immediately see legal challenges? And how fast do you think the Supreme Court would be likely to take that, given the implications of there'd be midterms coming up that would be affected by this?
Well, the court takes cases on an accelerated basis if it has to do with an election that's upcoming. So if this gets passed and there's a real issue that it's going to reach the court timely for the election, I think they would take it quickly. And the Trump administration has a lot of procedural vehicles they could use to get it to the court quickly. Now, in terms of the act itself, I mean, my understanding is it's overwhelmingly popular. Like whenever I've seen polling on this, I mean, even in like, any community, you're looking at 75 plus in the like, and that's the worst number. In some communities, it's 90% plus. So it seems like it's a very popular law. I guess people are concerned it has certain restrictions, like you have to show the ID to a human being at some point. But this is one of those weird areas where I'm not a big fan of comparing America to other countries, but occasionally it is useful. Almost every country in the world that's a democracy has voter ID. This is not an unusual rule. This is, in fact, the normal rule. So I don't. It's very strange to me that we're treating this as if it's some kind of sacred cow.
Would there be any sort of like states' rights arguments be had? Like, look, the Constitution says that the states get to proffer their own elections, so there can't be a federal law.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's likely to win on challenge, or do you think that like that wouldn't be the case?
I mean, I think they could try to make that argument. I don't think it's particularly winning because we have so many examples like the Voting Rights Act, where there were really serious, much more serious restrictions put on state sovereignty around federal elections, in the Voting Rights Act than would be put on by the SAVE Act. So if one's legal, I don't see why the other wouldn't be. I mean, the challenges will be made. And I don't want to pretend that we don't even know what they are yet. So
we don't even know what the final law would look like. So it's hard to say whether or not.
Exactly. So it's totally possible. I mean, no, it's not impossible. I would bet dollars to donuts there will be a challenge that invokes some kind of states' right theory coming out of the states you'd expect. California, where I think in California it's actually illegal to show the ID. Like they have a law that says you may not show the ID. Like whoa. Are you showing me an ID? You get the fuck out of here. Nobody's allowed to show ID.
Buddy. Yeah.
Yeah. We got 7 people behind you with no ID. They're the ones who get to vote.
Yeah. Letty wants to know from your channel, $10 says, will you quickly talk to Rob about the liberal cluck debate?
Oh yeah, your friend liberal. I got to reach out to him. So if he's watching, sorry, I know I've been delayed. He and I had a brief conversation, not like the long one, that I had with you. It was fascinating, man. He basically, I don't know if you see my philosophy content, but I do a lot of American philosophy on my channel, and I was trying to give him the pitch for natural law and the American founding philosophy, and he basically said, I think that's dead and gone. And I think that like it's wrong for you to try to resurrect it. Like we've moved past it as a nation, which I thought was just a shocking admission. And then I asked him, it's like, well, you think that all these immigrants are going to assimilate so easily? Why are they going to assimilate so easily? He's like, well, we have values in this country that they appreciate. I was like, that's interesting. I thought you just told me those values.
Right. Those values don't exist.
Yeah. Which values are you talking about? He's like, oh, freedom. I was like liberty. They love our liberty. That one of our founding values, but you just told me that that's nonsense and it's yesterday's news. So he's an interesting guy. He's a nice guy. I don't dislike him.
Yeah, I enjoy talking to him as well. I find it like, for me, like the central argument we were having was sort of the idea of like, the classic socialist conundrum, right? Very generous with your money, but how about their own? If you're going to say that more of my money needs to be going to charitable causes, what are you doing with your money? And, he said that, how sometimes you'll go to a restaurant like Chipotle And
Mhm.
it'll be like, $18.73. And they're like, would you like to round up to 19 bucks? He's like, why do that? Like, oh, okay, never mind. Unrealized capital gains tax it is then.
Yeah, I guess we're stuck with it. Yeah, it's a fundamental. I was struck by the fundamental disconnect. There was some stuff that we were talking about where I was like, oh, and this is, I think some people have been asking why I kind of got off the fence and I stopped doing the enlightened centrist thing and started doing the, reasonable right thing. And part of it, this is another big part of it. Judges was part of it, but a big part of it is this, like I don't think I share moral foundations with him. I think he's a nice guy. And because we were raised in the same culture, we share enough that we can actually get along. But if you kind of do the philosophical analysis and you're like, what do you think good and righteous is? What do you think America is? I don't think he has the same foundational values that I do. And I don't know that that's fixable. I think you could teach the next generation, but at a certain point, if you're talking to somebody who just doesn't believe that America is an exceptional nation, doesn't believe that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are values worth preserving, well, how are we going to ever agree on downstream issues?
Well, and like, look, this is beyond the scope of like sort of this show, because this isn't legal really, but there's a fundamental question that the West needs to answer, which is, I agree with the premise of like, we don't necessarily have countries for a specific race, for a
Mhm.
specific like origin, right? Like, I understand Japan for the Japanese.
Mhm.
Okay. Doesn't really work in the United States,
No.
given our history, right? I get that. We're not just a race or a people that we're all born here. I get that. And if you're saying, well, bullshit, that's the way it should be, that ship has sailed. You're not putting that genie back in the bottle. Okay, but there has to be something cohesive, right? We can't just be, well, we just happen to live next to each other, but you believe in Sharia law and, it doesn't work, right? Like, so what is it? And you would think that, well, what brings us together as Americans is sort of like the belief in the foundational principles of our country, right? That, and we could have disagreements on exactly
Mhm.
what that means on each, but ultimately that belief's there. And what you're increasingly seeing is like, well, that's irrelevant too. Like, no, I don't believe in that. For example, I don't believe in the Second Amendment. I don't believe in the First Amendment. No, and then it's like, well, then what brings us together? And I think that like, obviously you take polling with a grain of salt, but one of the polls that really first illustrated this to me was in Trump first term. There was like some poll, and it was like Gallup or something. It wasn't like a ridiculous poll that said more than 50% of Democrats said they'd rather be neighbors with an MS-13 member than a conservative, than a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
And it's like, what brings us together then? Like at some point you got to be like, well, okay, then if MS-13, for example, declares war on ICE in Dallas
Mhm.
tomorrow, what side's half our country going to be on? And if the answer is, it'll be split, then that's a real fucking dangerous place for the country. I don't know how we come back from that, because I don't see all of a sudden, like you said, maybe it's teaching the next
Mhm.
generation, but I don't see how I can live with these people that are like, well, we find that your values mean jack shit to us. The values of the Constitution don't mean shit
Mhm.
all to us, and we'll just do whatever we want because we have power. I know it's dark shit.
It's very dark, and I think this is the Jordan Peterson. He's obviously had his moments of foible, but one of the things he called well early was the danger of this kind of postmodernist thought, where people believe that if they believe something subjectively, that it is the truth. And that's kind of that's the moral consensus on the left these days. And we saw this, right? That's what the judge wrote down. She said, like, your personal truth should be law. She said it in her, so this is an influential philosophy. It's not like it's a joke anymore. There are people who really believe this and they hold power, but it's un-American. The American philosophy is natural law, that we were endowed by specific rights by our creator, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that our government will exist to secure those rights. And that's a broad philosophy. It's very compatible with Christianity, for example. It's very compatible with deism. It's compatible with Judaism. It's not compatible with everything. And one thing it's not compatible with is self-worship. Like if you think that you get to decide what the ultimate values are, well, the Declaration of Independence says otherwise. And if we don't agree, to your point, if we don't agree, we can't be a propositional nation if we don't agree on what the proposition is.
Right.
Right. And if we're not a propositional nation, well, then either the commies take over or the heritage Americans or the Christian nationalists take over. Right. Because if it's just a power grab, then somebody has to show up with a new ideology. That's the truth. So let's defend the proposition. Let's defend the proposition. Because honestly, it just feels like communist agitprop, where they're saying, this is all nonsense. I don't believe in this proposition. And conveniently, that will help me fuel my revolution. And we know better.
Well, the problem is, right, we could talk about this for us, but I'll just finish on this. Right, the problem is, from my perspective, of my side that wants that to be the case, if my side keeps saying we're going to keep pushing for that, and the other side's like, nah, we're good, we're just going to nakedly use power, then I have no choice to say, well, we must meet power with power. Mm-hmm. Right. And unfortunately, I think that's where we're leading, where it's like it's sort of like in a little microcosm of this was cancel culture. For years, I was like, I don't think we should be boycotting certain products. Mm-hmm. That's the left's game. Eventually, cooler heads will prevail. They didn't. Because what corporate America saw was like, listen, on one hand, if we piss off the left, they're going to boycott us. They're going to do all this shit. Media Matters is going to come after us. They're going to go after our advertisers. On the other hand, if we piss off the right, they'll go, oh. And so eventually it's like, well, fuck you. We're going to boycott you too. And it works. Then the companies are like, oh, okay, we'll try to play a middle ground. If that doesn't happen, game theory tells you, like, if I'm running the corporation, I'm like, yeah, don't piss off the left. The right ain't going to do shit, but don't piss off the left. And so at some point, it's like, just like with that, it's like, you have no choice on the other side of that to be like, fine, we're going to play the same game. You want to send all this money to NGOs for your fucking causes? The answer to us can't be, well, let's stop that. Because the left's going to say no, and the judges say no. So then the answer needs to be, fine, then we're going to send that money to our causes. How about that? And watch them yell and scream and be like, you can't do that. You can't, PBS can't be teaching Christian nationalism. They can only teach trans issues. They can only teach socialism. Yeah. They can't, we can't have Sesame Street being like, no, boys are boys and girls are girls. We can't have that. So it's sad that it's came to that because I think it's in our inclination. I think I could lump you in with this. Like, we just want to be left alone, right? If you want to go do stupid stuff, as long as it doesn't go beyond a threshold, like, hey, teach their own, right? Like, and we'll be polite to you in society, whatever. That was sort of always the agreement. That's sort of what the fathers intended. But my goodness, now I just don't know it. And like you said, when you have conversations with people like that, they're like, nah, I just don't believe in these values. I don't believe in natural law. I don't believe in the values of the founders. It's like, then what are we doing here? Well, right?
Here's why they're so mad about Trump. I took me a while to kind of distill this down, but I think I got it. I did this little project where I was like, every time I find a policy that I really hate, like something that just rubs me to the core as wrong, let me trace it back as far historically as I could. And the answer is going to be Woodrow Wilson or FDR 99 out of 100 times. Yep. 99 out of 100 times, right? So, and what this led me to understand is, and we can do examples some other day because it's kind of funny, but there's so many. The progressive project is all about agitating and then backing off, right? So it's like, oh, we move the needle, and then the Republicans make them back off, but it doesn't roll back. It just stops. And then the next wave, and then the next wave, and then the next wave. And we reached a point, and this is why I say the left lost their mind, where they had so many successes and the way it was moving so quickly that suddenly in the span of 5 years, 10 years, the party's dramatically shifted. You look at Obama's speeches in 2008, he sounds MAGA coded on immigration. And the party's radically, the progressive project is gangbusters moving. And Trump, for all my problems with him, and they are many, but for all my problems with him, he's the first president who hasn't just stopped it, he's rolled it back to some degree. He's actually rolling it back. And that shows it can be rolled back. And I'm telling you, it must be rolled back because the end game of the progressive project, not to be dramatic, is communism. That is the end game of the progressive project. Now, not every progressive wants communism. They don't have to. They're part of a movement that is on a trajectory And that's the trajectory. And once you see that, you can't really unsee it, is the problem.
Yep.
And people like Liberal Cluck, people like Pisco, who then come in and they say, oh, yeah, America has no moral framework. It's just a system of laws. It's people who have laws. Well, that's very convenient if you're trying to replace the existing moral framework with your own. And I think the jig is up on that, and we have to call it out when we see it. And this is why, by the way, I want to talk to Andrew so badly, because I'm trying to suss out, like, I think, something like Christian nationalism, a movement that can attract a head of steam is necessary. And I think, on the right, we need to figure out what that is and how to articulate it the right way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm assuming that you'll get a chance to talk to him soon. I know, like, Christian nationalism, it sounds scary, but when you hear, like, well, what do you actually mean by it? Right? Like, it's like having a cohesive value set that falls in line with Christianity, that's, instead of like, I happen to be a Christian who's a politician, actually proudly using that as your influence for the direction the country should go. Doesn't mean that you make illegal, for example, Judaism or atheism or anything like that. It means that we have a cohesive set of values and a moral framework of which to then identify law and culture to push forward. But he could explain his own version of it.
Yeah.
Anyways, Ryan, it was a tremendous show as always. What do you got coming up here? I'm going to put the link in my channel to your channel, and let us know what you got coming up here before the next show we do 2 weeks from now.
Well, thank you so much, Robin. And also, thank you all. I know Rob's audience has been a tremendous boon to me, so I appreciate you coming over to my channel and hanging out. I do law, American philosophy, and if you like this, you're going to like a lot of stuff that I do. So this week, I'm trying to be better about this. If you're watching, I'm going to end this stream and I'm going to do a bonus stream, maybe do some call-ins, read the super chats I didn't get to read, so we'll be doing that. Scheduling a follow-up debate with Liberal Cluck this week, and need to get some more stuff on the books, probably doing laid back law on Friday as well. And then on Monday, I'm judging a debate on Admiral Gibbs' platform. So I think topic TBD, but that'll be a lot of fun.
Is Gibbs debating?
Oh, hold on. I don't know. Let me check.
Gibbs moderated me at the debate con at Grids. And he did a hell of a job, but man, was he hammered. In fairness, he'd been moderating debates for fucking like 12 hours. And at that point, you're going to have a drink. So.
Oh, yeah. Oh my God, this is going to be hilarious. This is going to be an amazing debate. I'm so glad I agreed to this. Now I know why. It's should we have public schools? And it's Fabian Liberty against our friend Average Debate Enjoyer.
That'll be a good one.
That'll actually be a lot of fun. That'll be a lot of fun. So I'll enjoy being on the judging side. I'll stroke my beard and look like I have deep thoughts.
Nice. Yeah, that'll be fun. So, all right, man. Well, Ryan, it's a pleasure as always. Again, his link is in the chat, so please go over, give him a sub, and check him out. I'm going to keep streaming here for a while, and then So we'll be looking, I'm sure next 2 weeks from now, Monday, when we do the show again, I'm sure there won't be any legal stories to talk about. It'll be a very calm 2 weeks as always. So.
This is going to be the window where Trump stops having legal issues. Yeah, this is going to be the time.
All right, man. Well, hey, thanks so much as always, and we'll talk to you soon, man.
Yep. Booting up again on mine. I can't move you over manually, so when I go live again, you'll know. All right,
thank you so much. Take it easy. Yep.
Bye.
All right, let's do this. Now, I would do that. I would just start a new show, but I can't figure out. I mean, I could, but I can't figure out how to set it up on Rumble. Believe it or not, it's Rumble that gives me problems. So I don't know how to set 2 videos up at the same time. It's sort of odd. Anyways, let's change this. Boop. There we go. Let's bring up. I'll read some super chats now. It's always fun to do that show with Ryan. Helps give me an understanding of the legal issues of the day. Look at that, $124. Not too shabby, guys. Of course, I know 100 of that's our friend Wade Boggs. Nonetheless, Zach Gelpy, thank you so much for the $5. Then we have the great John Ruck, member for 17 months. Holy shit. Can you imagine watching me for 17 months? We're either insane or the most base dude that's ever lived. He says, hit the like, share, and stream. Jesus is God. Totally agree. John Ruck. And then we got JC. $5 says, correct me if I'm wrong, the demands for the Epstein files started on demand about his self-delete, not everything on Epstein. Yeah, that's sort of where it was initially, but I think that most people wanted like business ledgers and evidence of the videos and what they showed. I'm not so sure that stuff exists. Letty, $10 says, Rob Ryan talked to Liberal Clock, the lib who you talked to in your 24-hour show, said rounding up on Chipotle was equal to charity. I saw your post. Thank you for the $10. And yes, I'm glad we got to talk about that. The Great Wade Boggs, $100, says, just going to leave this here for later for the whip wheel. Thank you so much, Wade. Then he gives 20 memberships. Thank you so much. Then we got Baxter Boy, $5. Thank you. And then over on Rumble, MT Alex for $5 says, an originalist interpretation would allow cities or states to make their own laws against Muslim calls to prayer or any other type of religious activities. Possibly. So, all right. Now, I got to fill up my water, and I got to go to the restroom. But then what I want to do here tonight is I would love to take a left-wing call-in and smack them around. But that probably won't happen. I don't know how late I'll go tonight for various reasons. I got some stuff to do tomorrow morning. But I wanted to begin talking about this Marco Rubio speech, which I thought was very good. So I thought it's only 20 minutes. I thought maybe we would go through that and watch it. I think there are certain speeches that come through this administration. There was the Trump speech in Riyadh that I thought really set the tone. And I think Rubio's speech is even better. It's sort of explaining the vision that Trump and sort of MAGA, beyond Trump, but the people working in Trump's administration and possibly what you expect for MAGA going forward after a Trump administration, of what their belief is in sort of the United States when it comes to a position in the world and what the United States is trying to achieve. I thought it was a phenomenal speech. Look, I think Rubio's stock has risen for me probably more than anyone else in this administration. There are people like, I think J.D. Vance has done some really good shit. I think there's other people that have done really good stuff. But Rubio, from where my opinion of him was when he started to where he's been, I think he's doing a tremendous job. So I think we will watch that Rubio speech and then we'll cover some other stuff. But first, I'm going to go to the restroom and fill up my water jug. Let me see here real quick. Check some. All right. So I know it's been a while. I haven't streamed since Thursday. So let me give you all a chance to show you the real star of the show. My good friend, Chair. Chair, why don't you solicit some donations? Chair, tell them what you've been up to. Try to get some donos in there. I'll be right back.
This is the Rob Noerr Show. It's not the Noerr Rob Show. This is my favorite show. Because it is my show. If this was your show, you'd probably like it more. But maybe that's just because it was your show. But it's not your show. It's the Rob Noerr Show.
There's my wife. What's up? Sargon got a new chair. The rotten bastard. So let me tell you just a little of what I was up to here. Yeah, Chair was the man of the house. So I ended up flying out to Dallas to do some work with the Crucible for the weekend. And it's an exciting project that's coming out. I'm not at liberty to talk about it. I don't know what, if anything, Andrew said about it, but not my place. But it's a tremendous project that I think is just going to be amazing. And so when you all get wind of it, I hope you're as excited as I am about it. But I was more than happy to be a participant in that. So good stuff. However, it did lead me to fucking over a good friend of mine. So I would like to publicly apologize to Speakeasy, who had set up a debate for me. One second. I hoped to fly down and then do the debate from down there. But unfortunately, it didn't work out that way because we had to get working on the project upon me landing. Like, we had no time. So I was hoping to try to do the debate mobily Thursday, but we were supposed to do another no prep debate Thursday. So that's going to be this Thursday now. So I will make it up to Speakeasy, but I do feel terrible about that. And whoever my opponent is, who I don't know who that is, I don't flippantly miss shows. One of the issues with working with the Crucible is that sometimes you get called out at a moment's notice because there's so much stuff going on over there. And again, as busy as I am, Andrew's 3 times busier. So it was my pleasure to work on that project, but I do feel bad for the audience that expected to see me debating Thursday night, and for Speakeasy and whoever my opponent was. So hopefully I make it up to you all this Thursday, and we'll be doing that no prep debate. So I hope you all understand that I wasn't like out partying or any of that shit. I literally was doing work. So, all right. Anything else interesting to talk about? Yeah, one thing. Is it illegal to be a male flight attendant who's straight? Is that something that, was there a law passed that I don't know of? It's a strange thing. I thought on the flight down, I was like, oh, there we go. There's a guy. Looks like a, you know. And then I heard him talk, and I was like, oh, never mind. I did just have a lawyer on the show. I should have asked him. He possibly could have told us. I don't know what laws are on the book, but I guess I'm getting more used to flying, though. I had a nice old lady next to me on the plane, and she was very chatty, and it was cool until we took off. And then, you know how it is, like on public transportation, at some point you're like, I just want to close my eyes or look at my phone or read something. And I'm a chatty person, but even I was like, okay, pretty chatty here. Pretty chatty. So, all right. Enough of that bullshit. Stories to cover. I think, right? Now, full disclosure on this Rubio speech. Do I have the whole thing? Somewhere I have it. Thought I had the whole speech. Let me see. I was listening to it. I think I heard most of it, but I was in an airport. So I was like, had my headphones on, and it was... But what I heard was amazing, and I think it really sets forth a vision for that I agree with for the United States on what our role should be in sort of protecting the West and what that means. So we're just gonna start going through it, and I'll pause when necessary. Get him, Marco.
We gather here today as members of a historic alliance, an alliance that saved and changed the world. You know, when this conference began in 1963, it was in a nation, actually it was on a continent, that was divided against itself. The line between communism and freedom ran through the heart of Germany. The first barbed fences of the Berlin Wall had gone up just 2 years prior. And just months before that first conference, before our predecessors first met here in Munich, the Cuban Missile Crisis had brought the world to the brink of nuclear destruction. Even as World War II still burned fresh in the memory of Americans and Europeans alike, we found ourselves staring down the barrel of a new global catastrophe, one with the potential for a new kind of destruction, more apocalyptic and final than anything before in the history of mankind. The time of that first gathering, Soviet communism was on the march. Thousands of years of Western civilization hung in the balance. At that time, victory was far from certain. But we were driven by a common purpose. We were unified not just by what we were fighting against. We were unified by what we were fighting for. And together, Europe and America prevailed. And a continent was rebuilt. Our people prospered. In time, the East and West blocks were reunited. A civilization was once again made whole. That infamous wall that had cleaved this nation into two came down, and with it an evil empire. And the East and West became one again. But the euphoria of this triumph led us to a dangerous delusion that we had entered, quote, the end of history, that every nation would now be a liberal democracy, that the ties formed by trade and by commerce alone would now replace nationhood, that the rules-based global order, an overused term, would now replace the national interest, and that we would now live in a world without borders where everyone became a citizen of the world. This was a foolish idea.
Yeah, and that's the first thing. I think that he's absolutely right. Right now, you think of the problems that we're having in the West, and he's right, in Europe, right? The idea of like, oh, no borders, whatever. This is foolish. We can see what this leads to, and it is the erosion of the very liberal order that they're talking about. And I think that there was complacency after sort of the Cold War. Once look at Europe specifically, but also look at the United States. After the Cold War is over, like they actually, I saw someone say this the other day, or a couple months ago, I've been repeating this over and over again. They had to make up a new word for how strong the United States was, a hyperpower. That's how far and ahead the United States was the world power after the Cold War, right? And the failures that have happened both in the United States and Europe after that, right, of basically elites in these countries selling out the working class in these countries, in particular things like migration that you see, we're all one world, we're not individual countries, etc., is despicable. And I think that you could clearly see that the vision that Rubio is putting forth here is like why that was a mistake and what's going to be done about it.
That ignored both human nature and it ignored the lessons of over 5,000 years of recorded human history. And it has cost us dearly. In this delusion, we embraced a dogmatic vision of free and unfettered trade, even as some nations protected their economies and subsidized their companies to systematically undercut ours, shuttering our plants, resulting in large parts of our societies being deindustrialized, shipping millions of working and middle-class jobs overseas, and handing control of our critical supply chains to both adversaries and rivals.
Now, I talked about, there's a speech where Vance in 2022 is giving a similar speech about this. And one of the things he's talking about is like the idea of the United States chief export being dollars. The fact that it's like the world reserve currency. And I said, I was watching an episode of Tucker where an economist was talking about this, and they were discussing how, look, what sort of the vision that Vance and company and Trump by extension has is like, now is the key time. We have to change the trajectory that we're on. Manufacturing's been hollowed out. We rely on supply chains from countries that we consider hostile to us. The working class has been eroded, not just in the United States, but in the West in general. That's what so much of the idea of tariffs, etc. was. It was a gamble that if we don't do something now, it'll become more difficult in the future to do something about it. And while the United States is still in the position it's in, it needs to start saying, what can we do for the working class in the United States? not just our enemies, but our allies have been taking advantage. Even people within the United States, the ruling class, they don't give a shit. And the same's true of Europe. They don't care. They don't care about the peoples of their country. They care about benefiting themselves and their unique groups. And so I think Rubio's speech goes right in line with that sort of speech that we saw from Vance in 2022, with the speech we saw Trump give in Riyadh. Further saying, look, we're going to stop pretending that we don't have individual interests as a country. And we're going to start focusing on, like, wait a minute. Our peoples, what it means to be a country for us is the people of our country. And they're being sold out. And that's going to change.
We increasingly outsourced our sovereignty to international institutions while many nations invested in massive welfare states at the cost of maintaining the ability to defend themselves. This, even as other countries have invested in the most rapid military buildup in all of human history and have not hesitated to use hard power to pursue their own interests. To appease a climate cult, we have imposed energy policies on ourselves that are impoverishing our people, even as our competitors exploit oil and coal and natural gas and anything else, not just to power their economies, but to use as leverage against our own.
I mean, say what you will about the Trump administration and the failures thereof, and I certainly criticize Trump all the time. But what I say is the biggest victory thus far of both Trump administrations is at least changing the Overton window and shifting the narrative. It's easy to see that in things like securing the border. It's easy to see that in the trans issues. But my goodness, climate change discussion and the disastrous effects it was having. Can you envision an administration giving this speech under the Obama administration, under the Biden administration? Now, we'll see where this goes policy-wise, but just the fact that you have this administration standing up and saying, this climate change stuff is bullshit. It's allowing our enemies to weaponize it against our peoples. So, I mean, what an excellent thing to say internationally here at the security conference.
And in a pursuit of a world without borders, we opened our doors to an unprecedented wave of mass migration that threatens the cohesion of our societies, the continuity of our culture, and the future of our people.
The cohesion of societies and continuity of our culture. That's not just saying, they're taking a lot of welfare. And that's where so many people want to make the argument. Well, is the mass migration helping GDP? If so, great. If not, maybe we need to have questions. Yeah, fuck that. What about the cultures of our country? Yeah, I don't want Sharia law. I don't want a bunch of people from Haiti. I don't want a bunch of people from Somalia. Fuck that. There is something to be said about cultural cohesion. In Europe, it may be too late. You brought in millions of third world people that are doing third world shit in your country, and now they're getting power. And how are you going to change it? And again, to hear an administration say this, I think is exactly the tone that need to be taken. Let's see what happens as a result of this. But this is the vision I want to outline. No, it's not just about we're importing a bunch of people that financially are a drain on our system. That's true. But it's beyond that. It's absolutely beyond that.
We made these mistakes together. And now, together, we owe it to our people to face those facts and to move forward, to rebuild. Under President Trump, the United States of America will once again take on the task of renewal and restoration, driven by a vision of a future as proud, as sovereign, and as vital as our civilization's past. And while we are prepared, if necessary, to do this alone, it is our preference and it is our hope to do this together with you, our friends here in Europe.
I mean, that's a badass line. We're doing it with or without you. We'd rather do it with you. Now, think of what's going on right now. Think of the leadership. My goodness, at this point, so much of Europe is not only bad allies, but is our enemy. For example, the United States has companies such as X that allows things like more political speech that formerly were censored more, that is being aggressively targeted by countries in Europe, almost simultaneously, many of these countries, in efforts to censor free speech. They have attacked right-wing populist candidates in places like Romania and ensured they couldn't win elections. They have no doubt aggressively went after Trump. In my opinion, I believe we'll find that people like Joseph Mifsud, that was instrumental in starting the entire Trump-Russia collusion hoax, was probably working for British intelligence. And so Rubio's saying, like, listen, we'd like for you to push forth this goal with us. We're willing to go it alone if you guys are unwilling. I think it's a ballsy thing to say, and it's absolutely correct. Europe may be over as we know it. It may be too late. Do they have the guts to do what's necessary, particularly with migration? Probably not. And by the time they wake up and have the guts, they're going to be minorities in their own countries.
For the United States and Europe, we belong together. America was founded 250 years ago, but the roots began here on this continent long before. The men who settled and built the nation of my birth arrived on our shores carrying the memories and the traditions and the Christian faith of their ancestors as a sacred inheritance. And
that's no accident. Carrying the Christian faith of their ancestors. Just to say that. You understand how important that is to say this on the world stage? We are Christian. It was those values that were brought to the United States that made it special, that made it exemplary. Well done, Rubio, for saying it.
Unbreakable link between the old world and the new. We are part of one civilization, Western civilization. We are bound to one another by the deepest bonds that nations could share, forged by centuries of shared history, Christian faith, culture, heritage, language, ancestry, and the sacrifices our forefathers made together.
Now ask yourself, where's mass Muslim migration fit into that? Think of in context to what's going on as he's saying this in Europe right now and in the United States.
For the common civilization to which we have fallen heir. And so this is why we Americans may sometimes come off as a little direct and urgent in our counsel. This is why President Trump demands seriousness and reciprocity from our friends here in Europe. The reason why, my friends, is because we care deeply. We care deeply about your future and ours. And if at times we disagree, our disagreements come from our profound sense of concern about a Europe with which we are connected, not just economically, not just militarily. We are connected spiritually, and we are connected culturally.
Now, this is something that I've said a lot, and it's a lesson I learned from my dad, right? And I think it's true of Trump. I remember, I've told this story many times on the show. I remember one time I was out playing in the yard with my friends when I was a kid, and we threw a baseball through the neighbor's shed's window. And my dad was pissed. He told me before, don't be throwing baseballs around the shed, blah, blah, blah. But we were. And So my dad was pissed at me and I got grounded. And as he's like, call me in the house, well, you're grounded, get in there. He starts talking to my friends. Hey, what's up, guys? Blah, 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 blah. It's like not pissed at them. So he gets in the house and I'm grounded. I'm like, why you really pissed at me and not them? In fact, it was one of them that threw the ball. And he said, because you're mine. That's why. And the lesson is this. You expect more from your friends, from your family. You expect more from them. And I think this has always been Trump's sort of strategy with NATO, with Europe. You're supposed to be our allies, so what the fuck? So we're going to speak you that way. What are you doing? You're not paying your fair share. What are you doing? You have these tariffs against us. Your enemies? Putin's not such a bad guy, you know. You're blowing smoke up their ass. But with your allies, you're like, hey, what the fuck? And so I think Rubio puts it more articulately than I would. But he's like, look, we want you to do well. You are our allies, so perhaps we speak direct. But we want what's best for you. And I agree with that.
We want Europe to be strong. We believe that Europe must survive. Because the two great wars of the last century serve for us as history's constant reminder that ultimately our destiny is and will always be intertwined with yours. Because we know that the fate of Europe will never be irrelevant to our own. National security, which this conference is largely about, is not merely a series of technical questions. How much we spend on defense or where, how we deploy it, these are important questions. They are. But they are not the fundamental one. The fundamental question we must answer at the outset is, what exactly are we defending? Because armies do not fight for abstractions. Armies fight for a people. Armies fight for a nation. Armies fight for a way of life. And that is what we are defending. A great civilization that has every reason to be proud of its history, confident of its future, and aims to always be the master of its own economic and political destiny.
Now, Army should fight for that. But do they? I think Rubio is making an ought claim and not an is claim. Is that why we were fighting in Libya or Afghanistan? Imaginarium says, Continental Army fought for the abstraction of liberty. Yes, but it also fought for the people that wanted that liberty. It wasn't fighting for liberty in Africa. Is the United States, for example, fighting for sovereignty? Well, no. We'll violate sovereignty all the time. Certain countries we don't like. I guess it would be to say this, Imaginarium. Are there abstractions like liberty or security that are abstractions that are fought for? Sure, but only in the context of the peoples. So I guess I don't fundamentally disagree with what Rubio's trying to say here. Because understand why he's saying this. We don't fight for democracy. The United States, time to send your military out for democracy, for sovereignty. Send your military out because the U.S. military is about protecting democracy and sovereignty. No, it's not what it should be. It should be about protecting the interest of the United States. And for too long, we've pretended, it's about these. No. The United States is the world police. What do we put? For justice. We must intervene on the sake of justice. But nonetheless, I understand your point, Imaginarium. I do. But I also see what Rubio's trying to say here.
It was here, in Europe, where the ideas that planted the seeds of liberty that changed the world were born. It was here, in Europe, which gave the world the rule of law, the universities, and the scientific revolution. It was this continent that produced the genius of Mozart and Beethoven, of Dante and Shakespeare, of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. And this is the place where the vaulted ceilings of the Sistine Chapel and the towering spires of the great cathedral in Cologne, they testify not just to the greatness of our past or to a faith in God that inspired these marvels. They foreshadow the wonders that await us in our future.
It's very articulate what he's saying here, and emotional. That means something. Again, think of what he's saying in context of what we're told by every institution that we see. Europe and its ancestors are colonialist. They're terrible. They don't have culture. They're bloodthirsty. They owe the world something. They're oppressors. And he says, fuck that. No. Our ancestry is beautiful. And it's worth being cohesive and say, we want to protect that. And we're not going to leave. People come in and say, no, we're going to shit on that and say it's not worth anything. And that's not what your countries are about. Fuck you. Now, he says it in a way that's an appeal to the peoples of these countries. Look at your history. Look at you, your families, your ancestry. Look at what you built, the pinnacle of human societies. And the memorials that you have to it. The Sistine Chapel, the great history, the great thinkers, the building blocks of modern civilization. And it's worth fighting for those things.
But only if we are unapologetic in our heritage and proud of this common inheritance can we together begin the work of envisioning and shaping our economic and our political future. Deindustrialization was not inevitable. It was a conscious policy choice, a decades-long economic undertaking that stripped our nations of their wealth, of their productive capacity, and of their independence. And the loss of our supply chain sovereignty was not a function of a prosperous and healthy system of global trade. It was foolish. It was a foolish but voluntary transformation of our economy.
Again, I can't believe that I'm hearing this. These weren't accidents. The hollowing out of the middle class manufacturing in the Western world weren't accidents. It was intentional. The first step to solving a problem is admitting that there's a problem. And he is dead on. And again, it might seem obvious to someone like me. I talk about it all the time. But to see, not just Donald Trump, but someone like Rubio, who's considered like more diplomatic, coming out and saying this in the world stage. Our leaders fucked up our countries intentionally. Truly remarkable.
Left us dependent on others for our needs and dangerously vulnerable to crisis. Mass migration isn't some fringe concern of little consequence. It was and continues to be a crisis which is transforming and destabilizing societies all across the West. Together, we can reindustrialize our economies and rebuild our capacity to defend our people. But the work of this new alliance should not be focused just on military cooperation and reclaiming the industries of the past. It should also be focused on together advancing our mutual interests in new frontiers, unshackling our ingenuity, our creativity, and the dynamic spirit to build a new Western century. Commercial space travel and cutting-edge artificial intelligence, industrial automation and flex manufacturing, creating a Western supply chain for critical minerals not vulnerable to extortion from other powers, and a unified effort to compete for market share in the economies of the global South. Together, we can not only take back control of our own industries and supply chains, we can prosper in the areas that will define the 21st century.
Now, first off, let me say something stylistically. Remember when Rubio gave that speech and he needed like a glass of water 5 times? This guy gets a lot of dry mouth. Can you say? Sometimes I get that. Not a lot, but you can tell his mouth's a little dry there. It's all right, Marco. You're fucking killing it. You're killing it here, Marco. We don't give a shit if your mouth gets a little dry. Fuck him. Aside from that, what he said there is absolutely true. We should be working as a West, unapologetically celebrating our heritage and saying, you're damn right, we're going to advocate for the interest of our fucking people to be the global superpowers. Yes. To garner resources, including in the global South. And truly, imagine how this resonates in European countries where things are going to shit. It doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to be adversarial to the United States so that globalists in your own country continue to sell out the people of these countries. You don't have to. We want to work with you.
But we must also gain control of our national borders. Controlling who and how many people enter our countries, this is not an expression of xenophobia. It is not hate. It is a fundamental act of national sovereignty. And the failure to do so is not just an abdication of one of our most basic duties owed to our people. It is an urgent threat to the fabric of our societies and the survival of our civilization itself.
Again, a damn near perfect line. It is an abdication of our duty to the peoples of our country. Fundamentally, it's not about xenophobia. We have the right to say we control our borders for our people. And to abdicate that right is unconscionable and a failure that will crush modern civilization. Beautifully said.
And finally, we can no longer place the so-called global order above the vital interests of our people and our nations. We do not need to abandon the system of international cooperation we authored. And we don't need to dismantle the global institutions of the old order that together we built. But these must be reformed. These must be rebuilt. For example, the United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world. But we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role.
Fuck you, globalists. The United Nations does nothing. We need to stop looking at ourselves primarily as a global peoples as opposed to national peoples. We must focus on our nations first. I mean, this is fundamental to what I talk about every day on this show. I want my leaders in the United States looking out first and foremost for the citizens of the United States. That does not mean that I want them going out there and creating harm around the world. But the priorities should be on the interest of the people of the United States. But here's the kicker. That's what I expect of Canada's government, to look out for the citizens of Canada and the United Kingdom, to look out for the citizens of the United Kingdom and France and Spain and every other country. That should be the norm. And you cooperate with countries. This was Trump's speech in Riyadh, We're not interested anymore in making bold proclamations about what we think about you morally. We want to make money. We want to benefit our peoples, and we want to help benefit your peoples by benefiting our peoples. And if the Western world does this, then it's mutually beneficial for all of us. But as soon as you stop caring about the citizens of your own country and instead care more about some global order, well, we see the results. All people are displaceable, open borders. Your people's rights and wants matter little. Now, all of a sudden, wealthy interests have an easier time manipulating the political structures of these countries. They benefit themselves, and their agenda is not the same as the people's. They want more power for them. Very well said here by Rubio.
Could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce.
Barbarians.
It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace. It was powerless to constrain the nuclear program of radical Shia clerics in Tehran. That required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. And it was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice. In a perfect world, all of these problems and more would be solved by diplomats and strongly worded resolutions. But we do not live in a perfect world. And we cannot continue to allow those who blatantly and openly threaten our citizens and endanger our global stability to shield themselves behind abstractions of international law which they themselves routinely violate.
Again, fucking perfect. We'd like if we could all come together in an international order and do what's right for our peoples. But we can't because these institutions haven't done shit. In fact, quite frequently, the people there violate their own bullshit. Yes, he's absolutely right. In a perfect world, everyone could come together and would be able to work in unison to shame bad actors. But instead, it requires force. Where was the UN? In fact, many of the countries in the UN in general are pushing to continue things like the disastrous war in Ukraine. What good have they done short of hollow out these countries and allow the mass invasion of people who don't share the culture? Fuck you, says the United States. Then we'll go it alone. Brilliantly said.
This is the path that President Trump and the United States has embarked upon. It is the path we ask you here in Europe to join us on. It is a path we have walked together before and hope to walk together again. For 5 centuries, before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come.
Fuck communism. That's the right enemy to have.
Against that backdrop, then, as now, many came to believe that the West's age of dominance had come to an end, and that our future was destined to be a faint and feeble echo of our past. But together, our predecessors, recognized that decline was a choice, and it was a choice they refused to make. This is what we did together once before, and this is what President Trump and the United States want to do again now, together with you. And this is why we do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it.
I mean, brilliant. We want you to have the strength and dignity to protect your own peoples. Your weakness becomes our weakness. We want you to not be ashamed of your culture, of your peoples, of your history. Be proud. Yes! Fuck these insidious anti-white assholes that want to shame our culture. Fuck them! They want to destroy you. Be proud of where you came from. Be proud of who you are. I'm tired of pretending that the West isn't the best. It is. And what an appeal to these countries. That's how you should feel. Don't leave your peoples be overran because you have some sort of empathy, some suicidal empathy. No, your culture is wonderful. Protect it. Protect yourselves. Work with us. Amazing, amazing speech.
And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history.
Yes! That is what the West was. And what it could be. Amazing.
What we want is a reinvigorated alliance that recognizes that what has ailed our societies is not just a set of bad policies, but a malaise of hopelessness and complacency. An alliance is the alliance that we want is one that is not paralyzed into inaction by fear. Fear of climate change, fear of war, fear of technology. Instead, we want an alliance that boldly races into the future. And the only fear we have is the fear of the shame of not leaving our nations prouder, stronger, and wealthier for our children.
Yes! I saw someone said it in my chat here. Sean said, why is the bar so low that it's stunning to hear someone talk like this? Yes! Look, I love Trump. There are things I dislike about him. And I think that Trump's tone is right for so much of where we're at culturally right now. But to hear someone in a stately way say these things, it gives you goosebumps. Yes! For our children. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of my heritage. I unabashedly want my country to get better and want the world to get better for my son. I find it to be selfish to virtue signaling about the evils of our ancestors. Great men! Giants! That our generation stands on the shoulders of. And what are we going to do? Fail? Look at them with shame? It's time to stop. Draw a line in the sand. Fuck you. We don't listen to you pieces of shit that want to shame us. and say there's something wrong with our heritage. Go fuck yourself. Then go. Be gone. And Europe needs to do the same.
An alliance ready to defend our people, to safeguard our interests, and to preserve the freedom of action that allows us to shape our own destiny. Not one that exists to operate a global welfare state and atone for the purported sins of past generations.
We're not here to be your fucking welfare state because we feel bad because of alleged sins. Fuck you. The real sin is pretending that what the West brought to the world wasn't greatness. That's the sin.
An alliance that does not allow its power to be outsourced, constrained, or subordinated to systems beyond its control. One that does not depend on others for the critical necessities of its national life. And one that does not maintain the polite pretense that our way of life is just one among many, and that asks for permission before it acts.
That's right. We are the best. I am a Western chauvinist. We should not have to ask for permission. We shouldn't have to say, well, all cultures are equal. No, they're not.
And above all, an alliance based on the recognition that we, the West, have inherited together. What we have inherited together is something that is unique and distinctive and irreplaceable. Because this, after all, is the very foundation of the transatlantic bond. Acting together in this way, we will not just help recover a sane foreign policy. It will restore to us a clear sense of ourselves. It will restore a place in the world. And in so doing, it will rebuke and deter the forces of civilizational erasure that today menace both America and Europe alike.
Civilizational erasure. What a great way of putting it. That's what we're dealing with. These globalist scumbags don't give a shit about the West. They allow left-wingers that hate the West to infiltrate and to spread this vile fucking bullshit that we all must be ashamed of who we are and make amends for sins of the past. Rewriting history. Encouraging mass migration, welfare states, punishment on the very citizens of the country. Fuck them. No more.
So in a time of headlines heralding the end of the transatlantic era, let it be known and clear to all that this is neither our goal nor our wish. Because for us Americans, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe. Our story began with an Italian explorer whose adventure into the great unknown to discover a new world brought Christianity to the Americas and became the legend that defined the imagination of our pioneer
Celebrate Columbus. Celebrate Christianity. Yes.
nation. Our first colonies were built by English settlers, to whom we owe not just the language we speak, but the whole of our political and legal system. Our frontiers were shaped by Scots-Irish, that proud, hardy clan from the hills of Ulster that gave us Davy Crockett and Mark Twain and Teddy Roosevelt and Neil Armstrong. Our great Midwestern heartland was built by German farmers and craftsmen who transformed empty plains into a global agricultural powerhouse. And by the way, dramatically upgraded the quality of American beer. Our expansion into the interior followed the footsteps of French fur traders and explorers whose names, by the way, still adorn the street signs and town names all across the Mississippi Valley. Our horses, our ranches, our rodeos, the entire romance of the cowboy archetype that became synonymous with the American West. These were born in Spain, And our largest and most iconic city was named New Amsterdam before it was named New York. And you know that in the year that my country was founded, Lorenzo and Catalina Giraldi lived in Casal Monferrato in the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia. And Jose and Manuela Reina lived in Sevilla, Spain. I don't know what, if anything, they knew about the 13 colonies which had gained their independence from the British Empire. But here's what I'm certain of. They could have never imagined that 250 years later, one of their direct descendants would be back here today on this continent as the chief diplomat of that infant nation. And yet here I am, reminded by my own story that both our histories and our fates will always be linked. Together, we rebuilt a shattered continent in the wake of 2 devastating world wars. When we found ourselves divided once again by the Iron Curtain, the Free West linked arms with the courageous dissidents struggling against tyranny in the East to defeat Soviet communism. We have fought against each other, then reconciled, then fought, then reconciled again. And we have bled and died side by side on battlefields from Kapyong to Kandahar. And I'm here today to leave it clear that America is charting the path for a new century of prosperity, and that once again, we want to do it together with you, our cherished allies and our oldest friends. We want to do it together with you, with a Europe that is proud of its heritage and of its history, with a Europe that has the spirit of creation and liberty that sent ships out into uncharted seas and birthed our civilization, with a Europe that has the means to defend itself and the will to survive. We should be proud of what we achieved together in the last century, but now we must confront and embrace the opportunities of a new one. Because yesterday is over. The future is inevitable. And our destiny together awaits. Thank you.
One of the best political speeches I've ever heard, at least in our time. Amazing. Appealing to Europe. We do not want to go this alone. We do not want to see your countries fail, as it appears they are. For God's sakes, be proud of your heritage. It ain't all the right tones for me. It's remarkable. It's remarkable to hear someone stand up and say those things. Take pride in our history. We are the best. We unabashedly say so. We are Christian. And it's something to be proud of. Here, people were asking to see AOC speech. Here's a portion so you could contrast.
You are starting to see the ascent of the right, even in places like Munich. Marco Rubio's speech was a pure appeal to Western culture. My favorite part was when he said that American cowboys came from Spain.
I thought they came from Winnetou, but
I believe the Mexicans and descendants of African enslaved peoples would like to have a word on that.
She's wrong. They brought horses from Spain. What the fuck is she talking about?
But I think it's also important to note how thin that foundation is. Culture is changing. Culture always changed. Culture for the entire history of human civilization has been a fluid, evolving thing that is a response to the conditions that we live in. And
well, no, it's not that simple. While it is true that cultures change, it's also the consistency throughout history that we've seen that has allowed societies to become great. What is the implication here? Well, cultures change and the cultures of the West are what allowed the West to become so great. They are changing because of people like her that want to erase it and make us ashamed of that culture. There are incremental, small changes that occur within what we collectively call culture. But if it changes too rapidly, there's no cohesion. There's nothing that separates one culture from the next. It's relativism. It's exactly what Rubio's countering. The idea that we should be ashamed of the cultures that made us great. And therefore it needs to change. Fuck you.
so they want to take this mantle of culture. At the end of the day, though, it is very thin. And so the response that we have to have is, again, it's material, it's class-based, it's common interest.
She keeps saying it's thin, but she said nothing. I hate to say it, because it's cliche at this point, but as always, they accuse you of what they themselves are. What has she really said here? Well, cultures change, and when Rubio, his speech was thin. What? Talking about the vast history of fucking the relationship between the United States and Europe? And how we need to be proud of that history and what we brought the world? She's like, that's thin. And instead, we need to be conscious of class. These are just bullshit cliches.
Certainly more openness to what I was saying than probably there would be in years past. We can't underestimate the appeal of going back to these well-worn grooves. A lot of what we talk about when we talk about a class-based internationalist perspective also means ending the hypocrisy towards the global South.
You see? There you have. There's two visions for you. See, we owe something. Remember when Rubio was saying we need to stop being ashamed and assuming that we have to have open borders and be welfare for the rest of the world? Fuck you, AOC. Well, we owe. It's hypocrisy towards the global South. We owe them. Don't go back to fall into those old grooves of what? Exceptionalism? Creating a standard of a living that was beneficial throughout the entire world? Setting the building blocks of modern society and all things that are good with it? Let's not fall into that groove. These people that want to shame you for your culture and your heritage and your ancestors, what do they give up? It's a naked grab for power. That's all it is, and that's all it's ever been. From the Bolsheviks to the European socialists to the globalists we see today. More for them under the auspices of, but we're helping the poor. And you, the working class of these countries, you ought to be ashamed. Fuck you. I'm proud of where I come from. I'm proud of what the United States was built upon. I'm proud of my European ancestry. And fuck you. I'm tired of pretending that only people like me must be ashamed. For what? Building the best societies the world's ever seen? Go back to your fucking mud huts in the global south. Meanwhile, the large government, socialist, fucking globalist policies that they advocate for is always at the behest of helping the elites and hurting the working class. Always. Climate change. Name me a climate change policy that doesn't fuck over the working class. Mass migration. All of these policies. And what do they do personally? Nothing. Choose your way, modern West. Marco Rubio's way, working together to rebuild the alliance of the greatest civilizations that have ever existed, to take us into the future for our children? Or suicidal empathy of the globalist who benefit immensely under the auspices of helping the poor? Perpetual shame of who you are, who your country is, and what your ancestors were. Mass migration of people that have nothing in common with you culturally, pretending that their barbaric practices are somehow in line and just as good as your views. Enough! We were talking about Alex Preddy and Renee Good and all this stuff, and this woman called in. I was doing a show and was talking about the need to harden our heart. The left intentionally is setting up conflicts with federal law enforcement, knowing eventually it's just inevitable that there will be violent conflicts and that one of those will go south. And whether it be justified or not, they're going to exploit that. And I said, look, I still look at each individual situation and I'll still call out when I see things I don't like. But the truth is, we need to harden our hearts. It was not in me by nature to want to say, yeah, you know what? Fuck it. I don't care. Deport them all. I was forced to become that because of people that want to weaponize my empathy. So my answer to that is, for my son, I will harden my heart against these attempts to make me feel ashamed of where I come from. Fuck you. My son's future's more important than me virtue signaling that somehow I have to apologize for the sins of the father. That I can't acknowledge the greatness of the societies that my ancestors built. That I shouldn't push for the exceptionalism of what the United States once was and should be again. For my son, I will cheer for that. And fuck you. It is selfish to make his future worse off so that I can feel good virtue signaling. No more. What are we if not setting up a society better for our children? Rubio's speech is very good. Very good. And it needs to be a mantra going forward. That is the pathway. It is not one of division. It is not one of the United States versus the world. It is one of saying, if the United States must do it alone, so be it. But we desire a world of Western exceptionalism and allies that believe in it. That, yes, first and foremost, are also looking out for their own peoples, whom they're proud of. That's who we want to ally with. That's what we should be pushing together for. Not some globalist pipe dream that benefits the elites. Rubio's stock's risen immensely. Now, no doubt he has speechwriters, etc. But my goodness, the tone, the substance of that speech, truly amazing. The exact message that needs to be sent out there at this point in time. We're at a crucial point in the West. Are we going to let the globalists win? Are we going to leave our countries be overtaken? I talked about this on Law and Order with Ryan Mullally. What is it to be an American at this point? What is it? What's our cohesion? As he put it, the logical end game of all these people on the left is communism. It won't stop until it gets there. I would happily vote for Marco Rubio for president at this point. Happily. I would vote for that man that I just saw in Munich. It won't be easy. I don't know that he would win a primary. I don't know if he'd be my choice for first in the primary. But I'd be happy to support that man. Barring, there's a long time till 2028. So barring anything happening. Let's read some super chats. I don't know if you can tell, I was fired up. I'm in the airport listening to that speech like, fuck. Pandemic Slave, $5 says Vance Rubio 2028. I'd vote for that ticket. Donald Rose, thanks so much, man. $2 says, good to see you back, brother. Happy to be here. And GG, thank you for the $2. Thank you so much. The ironic thing is, had the country continued to go to the direction that maybe it was in the 80s, or at least what I think it was in the 80s, I don't know how much I would think about being proud of my heritage. But after constantly being told that I must be ashamed of it, it's had the exact opposite effect on me. I've never been more proud than my ancestors, than I am right now. I will unabashedly celebrate my belief in Western chauvinism. Every day the line in the sand becomes clearer and clearer to me, and just what we're up against. And I'm not going to back off. All right. We are not doing very good on donos tonight. I understand. A bit of a weird show, having a guest and then talking about this. I do, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you are, have a whip song to play. Of course, if anyone else would like any songs played, it's $100 to spin the whip wheel. So forgive me as I play this one song. For our good friend Wade Boggs, who, I mean, it's hard to complain, especially seeing as how he's responsible for like what, 60 to 70% of the money donated tonight? Oh, fuck. Of course, it had to be an absurd long one. So if anyone's bailing out, I get it. If you'd like to send some money on your way out, I would love that too. Promise we'll still read all the super shots. One of the most absurd ones. It's kind of catchy and kind of annoying, but my goodness, is it long. All right, enjoy.
We don't wanna go to war today, but the Lord of the Light says, nay, 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 nay. There's a way, there's a way. There's a way, there's a way. There's a way. There's a way, right, where there's a way. There's a way, right, where there's a way. There's a way, right, where there's a way. There's a way. Left, right. We're gonna march all day and night and more. Oh, we are the slaves of the Dark Lord's war. Oh, we are the slaves of the Dark Lord's war. Oh, we are the slaves of the Dark Lord's war. Where there's a way. Where there's a way. Where there's a way. Where there's a way. There's a way. There's a way. Where there's a way. There's a way. Where there's a way. There's a way. Where there's a way. Right, left, right, left. Where there's a way. Where there's a way. Where there's a way. A crack on the back says we're not gonna fight. We're gonna march all day and night. We are the slaves of the Dark Lord's war. We are the slaves of the Dark Lord's war.
That was
Yay.
fantastic.
Yeah, I had fun. Great. Good stuff.
Good Law and Order today. I hit a lot
Yeah.
of topics I wanted to get on. So
Yeah, it was good shit. He did
Yeah.
do it. Yeah, it was,
you look exhausted. Lots of travel.
yeah, jet lag still, travel, the good stuff. Tomorrow I'll be back to normal, I think. Not that I'm miserable or anything, just tired. Oh, my. What do I got here? So, rest of the week, we got Speakeasy Debate Thursday. Tomorrow will be a normal show. Actually, I got something planned for tomorrow. It should be fun.
Fantastic.
I've been inspired. So
All right.
we'll have maybe my persona will change a little at some point tomorrow. It should be good. Baxter boy, thanks so much for the $5. My goodness. Now I will have to say we got our ass kicked here as far as super chats
Well,
go.
I know why, so it's fine. It's easy to connect the dots.
Yeah, we know who's to blame.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I mean, I can easily put a banner up
Yeah,
God damn it, you beat me to it.
we know who's to fault. So, just like I had a lost son of you. Yeah, but in fairness, Wade is one of my best supporters. So Wade says, "Fuck him, fuck them kids."
Then,
You know, so,
I mean, it's funny that the 8-bit comes up a bunch, and it's the longest one.
I don't know how. Like, I don't know if that wheel is like weighted somewhere or something that I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Who are we gonna raid over to this fine day?
Well, after this next one that you're gonna have to play, so let's give a new guy. Let's give Confluence a run for his money. I'll send you the link, and he has a bunch of our guys on panel right now, so it's kind of like hitting two birds with one stone.
Okay, I was gonna raid over to Ryan, but that's fine.
Well, I mean, if you want to, I was saying
Confluence.
here's a small. I just sent you a link too, so.
Okay, let me in the on Discord. Gotcha.
Yep. So, and he's got a few of our guys. He's got Speakeasy on there right now, and a bunch of our other guys. So,
okay, we could do that. Where do I?
Smaller channel. So,
Mm-hmm. All right. Wade, thank you so much. $100 is all right. Fine. One more. Thank you, Wade. The funny part is, as Wade fucking like when people bitch about it, he's like, all right, fuck you then. Here's another, which I find hilarious. Thank you so much, Wade, as always.
he was inspired because I showed up for his presence.
Oh, this one's kind of funny. It's kind of funny.
I just wish this one was more Carmen Sandiego. You know.
Well, I mean, few things are. But all right, here we go. I love the audience interaction.
Oh, yeah.
Where there's a whip, there's a way. Where there's a whip, there's a way. We don't wanna go to war today, but the Lord of the Land says nay, nay, nay. We're gonna march all day, all day, all day. Where there's a whip, there's a way. Where there's a whip, there's a way. Where there's a whip, there's a whip. Left, right, left, right, left, whip. There's a whip. Left, right, left, right, left, whip. There's a whip. Left, right, left, right, left. There's a whip. Left, right, a crack on the back says we're gonna fight. We're gonna march all day and night and more. For we are the
I feel like I can work out to this part.
Oh, that's it.
Oh yeah, this part.
Where there's a whip, hey, 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 there's a way. Where there's a whip, hey, hey,
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, it's good to see you, audience. Have a wonderful day. Thanks,
you.
Wade Boggs, for the humongous donos today and keeping the show alive there.
Thank
Everybody,
you,
I'll be
yeah.
in the back in case more spins, but wonderful night.
Sir. Thank you. Here, how about a little palate cleanser?
As a Sufi Muslim, I'm very ruffled by the title of your book. Did you have to settle for the literal negation of Allahu Akbar?
Yes. I thought so. Thank you for that question. Thank you. At the moment, it's very clear to me the most toxic form that religion takes is the Islamic form. The horrible idea of wanting to end up with Sharia, a state of religious law, and that the best means of getting there is jihad, holy war, and that Muslims have a special right to feel aggrieved enough to demand this, I think is absolute obscene wickedness, and I think their religion is nonsense. God speaks to some illiterate merchant warlord in Arabia, and it contains the answers to all human. Don't waste my time. It's bullshit. But you're saying the same about it. Also, that God speaks. The Archangel Gabriel speaks only Arabic. All religions claim to be revealed truth, but Islam rather dangerously says ours is the last and final one. There can't be any more after this. This is God's last word. Now that's straight away a temptation to violence and intolerance, and if you note, it's a temptation they seem quite willing to fall for. Every Allahu Akbar reminds people that we're in a very serious struggle with a very depraved religion.
As a Sufi Muslim.
Get him, Christopher. All right. We're going to raid over to Confluence, I guess. Thank you so much to everyone. Oh, wait. I guess I haven't done that yet. Now, I'll bet this doesn't work. I bet Confluence doesn't have it set up, now that I think about it. Oh, no, he does. All right. All right. Okay. Well, thank you, especially to Wade Boggs, my goodness, for the donos. We'll catch up more on them in the back end. I don't know who Confluence is. It's one of Avarice's friends. Apparently a new up-and-comer. So, let's give him a shot. Hopefully you guys like him. I think he's covering some of Andrew Wilson's debate the other day with that Cooper guy. So it could be interesting. I will be back tomorrow evening to harangue you all for more donations, but that's okay. I hope you all enjoyed the show tonight. So enjoy this rate of Confluence. Thank you to Avarice. Thanks to my editor, Black Elk. Thank you to all of my moderators, everyone who donated, and everyone who chatted or did anything in the channel today. Remember, as we're talking about sort of Marco Rubio's speech and how great it was and other problems that we see as we were talking about in Law and Order, never forget the memory of Charlie Kirk, how the violent left killed him, then celebrated it, and what that means. So say a prayer for Charlie and his family. Thank you all for being here tonight. I will see you all tomorrow evening around 10 o'clock. And as always, have a good one.
Only in America is it possible to say, you know what, I don't like the way the country is going, and to do something about it. Take that risk. Take that leap of faith. Stay involved. Trust God and act obediently. Romans 12:2 verse. That God will use all things for good for those who love him. It's bigger than you. I want you to remember that. It is bigger than you. It's bigger than me. You are here to make somebody else's life better, the pursuit of liberty and freedom. You know what gives me strength? The hundreds of thousands of you that say, Charlie, keep going.
1 Corinthians 5 and 15. So that's all pretty amazing evidence, not just intra-biblical evidence, but extra-biblical evidence that Jesus Christ was a real person. He lived a perfect life. He was crucified, died, and rose on the third day, and he is Lord and God of all.